And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of the Bent Fender Podcast, your source for all, well, maybe not all, but most cool racing interviews, hopefully, in the tri-state area. I'm Nathan Conway, the driver of the number 40 stock car, your host here on this fine show. And with me, as always, Wes, the Iceman, Blue Island.
Iceman?
Iceman. I mean, you never know. I'm just changing them up, man. I don't know. I'm just,
okay.
I can call you whatever.
We'll go with it, see how it sticks.
You can call me whatever, too. Just don't call me late for dinner, you know what I mean? Anyway, huge show today. Big show. Josh Harris on the show today, the Kentuckian himself, driving the number 22 U.M.P open wheel modified here locally. And I say locally, but within, 3 states, 4 states he races, so that's a pretty cool deal. Just want to say, we've left the confines of the Conway Racing kitchen table and traded that for the Josh Harris kitchen table. They've invited us in their lovely home, and we certainly do appreciate that and the hospitality they've shown us so far and letting us record this episode. And he's going to be coming on with us here in a few minutes, so it's a pretty cool deal, isn't it, Wes?
It is, absolutely. He's much like most of the guests that we have on the show, my first time getting to meet and interact with them, getting to learn more about the class that he and Blaze Melton drive, open wheel modified.
This will be our second open wheel modified driver.
So it's a learning experience, always a learning experience, right. And I'm excited about it. Looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know he's going to have some good stories, good advice. Going to ask him about the state of racing. We got to do that and make sure that we get his take on it, because I'm sure he's got a good opinion on that since he gets to travel. He's fortunate enough to travel around and race at different states, different tracks.
Very
up
true.
To 50, 60 races a year. So, I think he's going to have a lot of insight maybe that, when people think about getting outside the box, well, we call the box here our local tracks within an hour.
Sure.
He's calling local tracks within 3 hours,
right.
4 hours. So, like I said, looking forward to that, getting his take on it. So, and it was a pretty cool deal. Also, then you got to experience this right before we came on the air. He invited us into the garage. We got to, look over the car and get up and close and personal and get in there, shoot a couple pop rivets with him. And it didn't do much, guys. I mean, we don't want to touch his ride. It's quite an expensive piece he's got there, and we definitely don't want to jinx it before the racing season.
It's an absolute beautiful car. So getting to see him and it up close was really cool. I guess, before I started doing a lot with you, and I was just kind of on the outside of the racing community.
Right.
His name was one that kept coming up. I kept hearing people talk about Josh Harris, and he's one of the more prolific drivers in this area. I think that he's got...
Well, he's accomplished a lot, and,
right.
and not taken away from any other drivers. I mean, each driver's career is different.
Right.
And they've got their own accolades, and they've got their own things that they've accomplished. But Josh has been fortunate enough to, be in that Mark Bush race car, and, that's a pretty cool deal, and we're going to get to ask him about that and kind of how that deal came about.
Right.
And, I think that's pretty cool because, I mean, you think about racing here and a lot of people think it's hard to make anything out of it. Just going to the track on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, whatever. But you can, I mean, through hard work and just, honing your abilities,
right.
Learning your craft. It's just like any other sport.
Sure.
I mean, practice makes you better. And I full well believe that, but I'm telling you, there's no substitute for seat time. I know you don't really maybe understand that, but again, I can liken it to other sports, football, basketball, whatever.
Sure.
When you're out there on that court in a basketball game and shooting free throws, I mean, you're going to get better shooting free throws.
Right.
Same thing in football. If the kicker has to kick field goals, or he's never going to get better. So, same thing with driving a race car. Whenever you get in that race car and get out on that track, you're learning all the time. So, and that's the main thing. So, if you ever stop learning, you probably ought to hang it up, because I mean, there's always something that you can learn.
I absolutely agree with that 100%. So what's going on with you? What's new in the Conway garage?
Well, I mean, we've we're way behind as usual. So we're trying to button up some things, put a new quick steer in the car, and got the front end welded up a little bit, the nose back on it, and fixed them dang plastic noses, But I mean, hey, who wants to buy another $125 nose when you can fix the one you got and it's still working great? So, getting some things done. I'm going to start putting the motor together and hopefully get that in there in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully be racing by early May. So that's the goal. But,
it's a good goal to have.
Well, it is, and it's. I wish I'd have had this goal, which I did. I mean, who am I going to kid? It's my fault that I'm behind. So, it's.
Well, some people just tend to operate much better when they're under pressure.
True, and we do, and I don't know, but you don't want to rush. That's the main thing on a race car. You don't want to rush because you end up making mistakes, and mistakes can be very, very costly, even small ones when it comes to your race car. So, man, a lot of things have happened. We're now on Spotify now?
Yep, we are now. You can, if you're a Spotify user, you can find the podcast there.
And where else we're at now? YouTube?
YouTube, yeah, that is a brand new thing. We learned via our tool chief, Douglas, your stepson, that a lot of people do enjoy the podcasts on YouTube. So we've got it set up now to, if that's what you want to do, you can go to our YouTube channel and get the podcast there too.
Well, YouTube is it's a pretty good outlet for people to go to. It's fairly easy to use,
right?
And not that most of the outlets that we've got aren't easy to use, especially if you've got smartphones. But YouTube is user friendly, so that's
sure.
A lot of people, I guess, have asked, and we listen.
We did,
just like it said in our post. So you can find us iTunes, Google Play, Podcast Addict, Podbean.com, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Is there anywhere else?
Facebook and our website.
Yeah,
you can get the podcast there as well.
I guess I should tell you what the website is. That's www.conwayracingteam.com. We can find us on Facebook, Conway Racing Team, Twitter @Conway Race Team, Instagram Conway Racing. So, man, if you can't find it, and I'm not saying that because you might not be able to find it, but if you can't find it, if your friend can't find it or your family member can't find it, let us know, and we'll definitely walk you through the process. I know I had to. A particular individual on Facebook the other day, they couldn't find it. They messaged me, and within a few minutes, I had them hooked up with the podcast, and boy, did they enjoy it. So,
well, you also you did something pretty cool as well. I'm gonna spill the beans a little bit for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Not that they've already heard it. So you were a guest on the Regional Motorsports Power Hour.
I was with Blake Smith, our first guest that we ever had on the show.
He was, and it was his kickoff event for his season.
Yep.
So you got to have some radio time there, get some live action happening.
Yeah, it was pretty cool because I really wanted to. I'll tell a funny story, and I even told Blake this, but I don't know if you'll find it funny, but I do. But I kind of think it would have been funny to come back from commercial and just roll into the Bent Fender podcast on the radio, and he'd be like, "Wait! This is my show, man. What are you doing?" I mean, I thought it was the second part of our episode, but I don't know. It was funny to me, funny to him. We got a chuckle out of it, so that was pretty funny. So
he had a good turnout. A lot of
big turnout, yeah.
New faces for me, some familiar faces. Got to hang out with some friends, and
I definitely got to talk to several people, and one big thing that is starting to stick out like a sore thumb, really, to us is that people, they want to hear the old timers, and we are definitely going to make a concerted effort to find them, to get them behind the mic, and maybe get those stories out of them. Eventually, and we've talked about it, but we definitely want to get some more equipment, and we're working on that.
Working toward it.
Yeah, we're working toward it. But we want to get some more equipment to where we can have 3 or 4 mics, we can have 3 or 4 people, and some of these guys that all raced together back in the the 60s and the 70s.
Sit around and
let them
tell
sound
tales
off on each other. You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
Half the time stories breed stories, and some guy's going to tell something. I remember that, and then he's going to go into a story. So,
and I think that what we can do with that, we can have a whole series where we do a special, on top of this regular episode of the show that we do every week. We can put out a special episode where we can make sure we're chronicling those stories and getting them saved for posterity.
Right. Well, real quick, Blake Smith, the host of Regional Motorsports Power Hour, his show every Monday night. What is it? 102.7 The Game, 94.7 WBIO, live from Maloney's in Owensboro. Every Monday night through September. They're now an hour-and-a-half show.
7 to 8:30.
7 to 8:30, yeah. And also got some good news from Billy Egler. Performance Racing Weekly. Performance Racing Weekly. You guys remember that. Follow them on Facebook. Follow Billy, and they're going to be coming with interviews and some different stuff this year. Different format, but it's going to be awesome. And I think that's cool. And,
I think between I'm going to throw our hat in the ring and say that we are on par with those guys. They've been doing it for much longer than we have. They've got some more experience under their belt. But I think between the three, us and Blake and Billy, we are putting out a good
representation
of racing in this area.
Yeah. And that's cool because Billy's been in the game for years, and that guy. He knows so many people in racing and can tell stories as well. And obviously, we want to try to get him as a guest on the show too. So, real quick, our sponsors, Mach 5 Race Cars and Parts, Fairview IT Management, Martin's Towing and Recovery, Chad's Barbershop, Glenstone Construction, and Slingshot Media Group. As always, we're affiliated with Casper Racing, Phantom 309 Racing, and Blaze Melton Racing. So, wanted to get that out of the way before we got into the meat and potatoes. We've had the precursor to the dinner, but
I think some people would call that an appetizer.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know what it is.
But we've rambled long enough.
Because guys, I can't tell you, it's going to be cool. You're going to enjoy this show. I really believe that. So, and I hope that you enjoy them all before this,
absolutely,
and all after this, because we want to keep getting better and better, and we're probably going to be getting more goofy as it goes on, or you might think so, and because we don't want to be straight laced, we want to be, we want to be easy listening as it is. So, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and throw it to the first commercial break, and we're going to come back on the other side with the Kentuckian himself, Mr. Josh Harris. We've got a lot of great friends and sponsors here at the podcast, and we want to take just a quick second to recognize one of them. It's going to be Martin's Towing and Recovery out of Owensboro, Kentucky. Anytime that you need any locksmith services, record services, or roadside assistance, don't hesitate to give them a call. 270-929-0718. Like I said, give them a call, 270-929-0718. That's 24-hour service. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back here on the Bent Fender Podcast, and another huge show today. I promised you when we started this show that it was going to be huge, and we're going to have the Kentuckian himself, Mr. Josh Harris, coming in with us. Josh, welcome to the show, and we appreciate you coming on with us, buddy.
Thanks for coming out. Glad to be a part of this deal, and glad y'all decided to contact me and get some stuff out there.
Well, I think that especially when we were talking about putting this show together, it was a no-brainer. Obviously, we're going to have to get you on here and try to find out some of your story and maybe the stuff that obviously that I don't know. I know you from the racetrack, but again, we haven't had a whole lot of conversations, and I think we're going to find out a lot of things today, and hopefully the fans will too, and that's what we're doing it for, is the fans and the sponsors. So we're hoping that you provide us with some good stories and take us through a background of where you started.
Yeah, most people know me from my dirt racing, and it started way before that. I didn't start dirt racing until probably, I think, 2000. And I actually did some go-kart racing I started go-kart racing probably about 1990, did that for 4 or 5 years, and then I asphalt raced for 4 or 5 years before I come dirt racing. So not a whole lot of people know about the stuff that we did back then, and maybe we get into some of that today. And
definitely.
And talk about where we come from and how we got to where we're at.
Well, so your career, I guess, started in 1990. On the go-kart circuit.
Yeah, I believe it was 90. It was right around that time, 90, 91, something along that. I four-wheeler rode and had a couple, dirt bikes and stuff like that. And a friend of mine down the road, he was going to go-kart racing one night, and I went with him and come back home and told my mom that I wanted to go-kart racing, and she said that she said that the only way I was going to do it, sell my dirt bike, and so 2 or 3 days later, the dirt bike was sold and go-kart was in the garage, and that's kind of where it started. We went over to Paul Lear's and bought a cart and a motor from him, and man, didn't know anything at all about it except they went in circles. And
well, that's and, it didn't go over jumps and things like you were used to.
Yeah, that was about all we knew about it. And first 3 or 4 nights we raced, I run dead last, and we went to a track down in down near Draftonville, Kentucky, and it was called TK Raceway. I don't think it's even there anymore, but I passed a guy with like 2 or 3 laps to go for last place, and it was the first night that I'd ever not finished last, and I was just tickled to death. And I come in, and I'll never forget, my mom said, "I've never seen somebody so excited to finish second to last." I was like,
well, that's, I guess that's, you could say that's the essence of racing. I mean, when you're just starting out, you're tickled to death to be out there, and you're getting to do something that you've never done or you haven't done very much, and that's something to be. Because you got to have goals in racing, and that's one of those things where, okay, so I finished last. I'm starting to learn. Well, now it's time to start moving up through the field.
When you're 10 years old, you don't really 10 or 11. You don't. I mean, I just wanted to race. I didn't know anything about it. I come from a racing family. Laws Mayfield, and that's my mom's uncle, so I'd always been at the car track watching, and I never realized that. I'm always thought that when I turned 16, 17, I'd be able to get in a car and race. I always knew I wanted to do that, but it wasn't until that night I went out there to Hartford go-kart track that I realized that there was some racing that a 10-year-old could do, and honestly, my only goal was to race.
Right.
When we started, I didn't know I didn't know anything about it. So
where it was going to lead or anything.
Yeah, we just went out there and started go-kart racing, and heck, I mean, I think it probably took a year or so to get our first win in it. But it was kind of like, before you got that first win, it was, everything was just fun. It was just, you just went out there and raced, had a good time, and then, man, I got that first win, and then you had to win every week. Then it, then it just
you get eat up with it.
Yeah, it's like everybody gets bit by the racing bug. Well, I mean, it's the winning bug that gets you. You know, it's we got that first win, and it's been wide open ever since.
Well, you talk about getting that first win, and I know that while I only have one feature win, that win is so special to me. And if I never win another one, hey, it is what it is. I'm out there competing. I'm just having a good time. And you're right. It's one of those things where I know in my career, hey, I've run in the back of the pack. I've run in the middle of the pack. You get a taste of that up front, man, and you're no stranger to victory lane now, obviously, but you get a taste of that front. I mean, it just eats at you. It's where you want to be.
It does, and it's just so much. I mean, people don't realize how much more work it is to go from a 5th place car to a winning car. I mean, you can probably take a, you can actually have this as a hobby and go out there and run 4th, 5th, 6th every week and have a lot of fun doing it, but to go from consistently being that 4th, 5th place car to that winning car, everybody tries to say that it's, they don't have the money to do that, or they don't have they don't have this, they don't have that, and that's not it. It's the work. It's the hours you put in that it doesn't cost any money at all to be prepared.
No.
It just takes time, and everybody's looking for 2 or 3 tenths of a second all the time, and having free ball joints is a tenth of a second, having free heims is a tenth of a second, having your tires freshly ground is a tenth of a second. That's all stuff that is absolutely free to do. Yep. It just takes time to do it, and bam, there's your 3 tenths. Right. So then when it gets tough is when you get up in the bigger races and the higher races, and everybody's doing that stuff. Yeah. and then it gets kind of tougher to find that speed. But it's something that I've done my whole life, and it's just been me and my wife both have pretty much dedicated our life to racing, and it's kind of all we know. And a lot of times by the end of the summer, we're like, man, this is crazy. We're wearing ourselves out, and we're spending all of our money, and we're running up and down the road, and we have no free time, and then we're off 4 months in the winter, and and it's eating us up. We can't wait to get back to the track. So.
Well, that's one of those things, even with your off time, and I want to go back to something here in just a second, but even in your off time, a guy once told me, Shane Sullivan, I've said it on several episodes, he always said, race car don't end on Sunday, it begins on Sunday, and even though, you have those 4 months off, that you've got race car on the brain, what we got to do, what we got to get ready for the next year. And with being in the series, some of the stuff that you're in with the U.M.P modified series and the AMS series, that's a big deal to always have an eye toward what's coming up on the horizon.
Yeah, even if, most time we build a new car in the wintertime, but even years like this year where we didn't build a new car, I'm using the same car run last year, but it's essentially just like a new build because we take the car completely apart, have the thing repowder coated, replace all the heims, all ball joints, all moving parts get replaced, and then the entire thing gets put back together. So essentially it's a new build every year, whether or not it's actually new or not. So if you at the end of the season's over, if you take a month off, decide we got all winter to get this thing done, well, it comes up on you and you just don't have time to do it. So essentially the last race of the season, we're out in the garage getting everything stripped down, cleaned up. What is kind of our little break is when the car is at the powder coater. It's usually there 2 or 3 weeks. So that's kind of the 2 or 3 weeks we have off in the winter where we don't do anything race car related. Me and my wife and her parents and my parents, we take a family trip. We go down to Florida and spend a week or so, all of us, and that's just kind of our time there where we don't do anything racing. But other than those 3 weeks a year, it's we're either in the garage at the racetrack or doing something racing related every single night of the week. 365 days a year, other than those 2 or 3 weeks there where the car's at the powder coater.
Well, but you gotta, it takes that commitment, and just like a couple episodes ago when we talked to Jimmy Westerfield, another guy who has dedicated his life to racing, and he's done it, more than half of his life, and it takes that commitment, and I always say that racing drags on, several different things, whether it be time, money, relationships, because, and that's the good thing about having a spouse who's on board and having a family who's on board, who loves it just as much as you do. It's one of those things, and that's worth a lot right there.
Yeah, it's me and my wife, we don't have any kids. We've been married coming up on 17 years, and she loves racing as much as I do, and there's a lot of times we get off work, and I'm like, go out and eat, go to the movie or something. She's like, no, we need to go and work on the car. That's no joke.
Be still my heart.
That's no joke. There's a lot of times when that happens. She pushes me to be the best that I can be, and there's nothing really on that car that she can't do, and if I do it wrong, she'll tell me about it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, and I think a lot of guys out there know what it's like to get in Dutch with the wife. So
yeah, it really is amazing to the relationship we have. We work together all day. We work in the shop all day, and a lot of times we'll be at a customer's house or something. They're like, I do not understand how you all spend so much time together and work together nonstop.
And that's pretty cool that that you do get to spend that time much time together, and that's your best friend, and that's what a lot of people are looking for, especially in their career and also their life. So that's pretty.
Yeah,
pretty neat.
a lot of our customers, like I said, we work together all day, and then we race together, and we've probably spent more time together than a lot of people that's been married 50 years.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of our customers are like, man, I don't see how you all work together all day long and spend so much time together. And I always tell them, I said, well, luckily for her, I'm a delight. So,
listen here.
But she don't. She usually agrees with that, but sometimes it's an agreement with an eye roll.
Well, I want to go back into something real quick. You talk about preparedness and how it doesn't cost anything, and I know you've probably it's bit you before, not having that one bolt tight or not having that one electrical connection shored up like you should. I know it's happened to me. I've lost races because of it. Not bitter about it. It just, but at the end of the day, it's my fault. So I think that there's no price you can put on that.
Absolutely.
to be ready to go.
The about the only time something like that happens to us, and happened last year, when we have a complete new build. We were first night out. Last year we did build a new car. We'll probably get into this a little bit later, but I switched teams in 2017. So new car, new engine, new everything. And we were at Florence first night out, and we had a fuel pump bolt come loose. And had it not been for that, we were in contention to win a race. So, but throughout the week, it's so critical to just go over the car and look at everything. And I see people show up at the track with a dirty car, and a lot of people look at our stuff and wonder why we spend so much time cleaning and wiping, and the reason for that is when you're under there and you're wiping off every bar with a towel or a rag or whatever, if something's wrong, you'll see it. It's not just because we're neat freaks, which we are a little bit. We're a little obsessive about that, but the main reason for that is if you physically have your hand on every bar or part on that car, and if there's something wrong, more than likely you're going to see it.
Right, and that's important, especially. That's any level of racing, whether it's dirt bikes, go karts, stock cars, or modified stock cars. That's very, very important because those things can sneak up on you, and you might not. There's been times where you might get bumped on the racetrack and you don't think, oh, that ain't no big deal, but then you go back and you find something. We're notorious for finding things in the middle of the week, to have to fix. So
yeah, that's like I said, that's just the most. That's the most critical deal about running at the level competition we run at is every time you pull on a track, you got to know your car's best that it can be because half the guys that pulling on there with you, their stuff's right. So
and you think about that, and you're talking about having that to me is a weight off your mind, because what you need to be focused on when you pull on that racetrack, it's time to go to work, it's time to drive that car. Let's try to get the win. That's what we're there for. And if you're not, oh man, did I grease that heim joint? Did I make sure that this is on there? That's tight. That stuff is and drivers think about that stuff, and you're always in the car and you're thinking, and it's one of those things where it's right. You did it. You touched the boat. What I mean?
It's a critical. Yeah, it's a very critical part. So,
well, we talk about when you started in go karts, but before that, what got you interested? Were your parents taking you to the track, or
like I said,
places,
we were kind of, like I said, we come from a racing family. We always had somebody that was out at Whitesville racing or something like that. So a lot of, we didn't go every week like a lot of people do, but I can remember spending a lot of days out at Kentucky Motor Speedway. We never really went to the dirt track. Kentucky Motor Speedway is where it was at, and there was probably 2 or 3 years there where we didn't even go at all. Like I said, probably 9, 10 years old. My dad passed away when I was 8 years old, and we didn't really go much there after that. And like I said, a buddy of mine down the street was going go-kart racing, and we went with him. And then it was like I said, we got a go-kart, and then we raced. We didn't do any of the traveling go-kart stuff like a lot of people do. We just raced. Hartford had a little track, and they had a track over in Princeton. We raced over there a lot. Winslow, Indiana, Lagodi, Indiana. There's 4 or 5 tracks we run. We'd probably race, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a month. Not a whole lot. We didn't get super serious about racing, I guess, until I turned 16 and I got my first street stock that we run out at Kentucky Motor Speedway. And we ran a street stock car out there, and that was back in the days where Bruce Birch and Frankie Bartlett and those guys were just dominating. And my goal when we did that was just to be able to compete with them. And Philip Hines, me and Philip Hines, we raced for Rookie of the Year that year together. And man, I can remember my first year running a street stock at Kentucky Motor Speedway, and people aren't even going to believe this, but we had C mains. The street stock class that year was 50 or 60 cars deep, and it was just amazing. I think everybody took for granted back then how easy it was to get car count, but we ended up winning a couple races that year, and got to where we could compete with Bruce and Frankie, and I really looked up to those guys, and still do. Still see them from time to time, and but we only run out there 1 year. We run third in the points. I think Bruce won it. Frankie was second. I was third. And we won Rookie of the Year that season. And the next season, my uncle, Laws Mayfield, he said, "What do you think about going to Nashville and running?" They had a class down there that they had just started running on the 5/8 mile track.
Right.
Prior to that, the late models were the only thing that run on the big track, and everything else run on a 1/4 mile. So they started this street modified class on a 5/8 mile track, and he said, "What do you think about going down there and racing?" And I said, I'm all for it. Let's go. So that winter of 90, 96, 97, we built that street modified car, and we went down there, and I won Rookie of the Year down there that season. And then the next season we got in a late model and run it a couple times at Nashville.
Right.
And then we run, this would be up to 98. Then 98, 99, we run a late model at Highland Rim, back and forth to Nashville. But we didn't race a whole lot. It wasn't, asphalt racing isn't like dirt racing. We would race 15, 16 times a year. And that 98, 99 seasons, when I wasn't racing, I was going to the dirt track with Jimmy and Randy Westerfield.
Right.
And that was actually my first exposure to dirt track racing, was when I started going with those guys. And everybody always thought I was their little brother. And I still get that to this day. I was on the other day, and a guy in there was like, "Hey, y'all got that track ready to go yet?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, we're getting close."
That's about all you
instead of explaining
sure,
all that. So, but I get that all the time. But we were at Chandler one night testing with Jimmy, and test went pretty good, and he was pretty pleased with his car, and he said, "Hey, you want to get in there and drive that thing?" And I said, "Well, heck yeah." So my first laps in a dirt car ever was in Jimmy Westerfield's modified, and it was I continued helping them to the end of that season, and over the winter, that winter I think it was probably the winter of 99 going into 2000, I started putting together my own mod, and the next season we ran probably, and I was super low budget, didn't have a whole lot of money to do that, because with the asphalt stuff I was driving for my uncle, but the dirt car was going to be my own, so I was funding all that myself. And I get the car almost built, and my uncle's like, "Well, what are you going to do for a motor?" I'm like, "Honestly, I don't know." And
I'm trying to build the car.
And he let me sweat it out for a little while, but he ended up building me a motor to put in my dirt car, and we ended up not doing any more asphalt racing. And well, we did do some asphalt racing in I think 2002 or something. We built another late model when Whitesville first extended the track, but it didn't go good at all. I ran it 2 nights and wrecked it 2 nights, and I was like, I'm going back to the dirt track.
It's time to quit here.
So anyway, it's just like this. I'd always grown up wanting to do the asphalt deal, and we were successful with that. But man, this dirt racing just fit my style, and I mean, it's like from day one getting in. I'm not like a whole lot of guys. When I went dirt racing, I went straight into a modified.
Right.
I never run a street. To this day, I've never drove a full body car on dirt other than a late model, but like no street stock cruiser type car like that. I've never made a lap in one. But my seventh race out in a modified, we outrun Mike Sweeney and won a race down at Nebo, which Mike was a real good racer. He's Randall Sweeney's brother. Right. So it's just, this dirt racing just fit my style, and we were just super successful with it from the get-go, and that's kind of what I've stuck with. I mod raced for 4 or 5 years there, and then we went and did some crate late model stuff, and then run a season of some super late model racing, and then went back. They were starting to get this crate late model deal was getting really big around here, and they were paying good, and the class was really growing, so we got into it. And then the series that was running, it was called the Crate American Racing Series, and they ran for about 3 or 4 years. And that was my Crate American Racing Series. I think I run it in 2000, maybe 5, 6, 7, or 6, 7, and 8, something along those lines. but that was my first taste of running for a national series, running on actually being competitive on a national stage. So we ran every year in that deal. We ran top 3 or 4 in the national points, and one year we almost won the thing. And what ended up happening was we run second in it, and there was a guy that won it, and there was some controversy over what had happened with I don't know all the details, but I had some officials coming to me and like, hey, so and so's been letting this guy cheat all year, and we feel like you're the winner. Well, anyway, long story short, that whole group of guys that was putting that series on, they all got into it. The thing went belly up, and the next year, U.M.P took over the crate late model stuff, and to be a successful series in any type of crate class, you have to have dedicated tech, and you have to have a lot of tech to keep that deal right, and U.M.P just didn't have that and didn't really stay on top of it, and it kind of died out, which there's still some crate late models around here, but nothing like it was, nothing like it was back then.
You talk about tech, and I want to get in that here in just a little bit. We definitely want to touch on that, and I want to come back to that, but that's tough, and dissension at the racetrack, who would ever thought, some of these tracks, but that's sad that a class was building that much momentum, and you had guys that were like, hey, we're in the ground floor of this thing, it's gonna be awesome, and then it just has to, it just immediately goes away because of some bad decisions.
The rule package that series had together, it was great. I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of sponsors that year when we transitioned over to the crate late model, and it's the only year like the races were paying like $750 to win.
Right.
The cars were cheap, the motors were cheap. I ran 50 races that year on 4 sets of tires. That's unheard of. Now I run 50 races a year, and it's on 50 sets of tires. I mean, it's we literally bought, I think, like 110 tires last year, and that's just it's crazy to think that at that point in time, when the way that car series, the Crate American Racing Series, had it set up, is you could race that class, and I think it might be like one of the only years that without any sponsors or without anybody actually paying me to drive a car, that we actually won more money than we spent that year. So it was a really good thing to start with, and it went bad real quick because you had a couple guys got in there and they started building cheater motors, and they were getting away with it, and it just run everybody off.
Well, the crate classes, and you don't see them much anymore. I mean, except at maybe Clarksville and Paducah had a crate class for a while, and I think they're going to bring it back this year. But
yeah, that's where I run mostly was Paducah but it was under that sanction,
right?
And it was kind of like U.M.P. They had, I don't know, 8 or 10 different tracks that we ran, but most of our races were at Paducah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's cool how they're trying to maybe bring it back a little bit, but I think, and we've seen that with the old E-mod classes and stuff where people were supposed to try to run crate motors. There's always going to be somebody who probably is going to crack those things open and start doctoring them up, and that's sad because, I mean, it can be good.
Everybody thinks rules save money, and they don't. Rules just cost people money. I mean, it's you cannot have a class with a lot of rules and no tech. The only people that's helping are dishonest people. Mm-hmm. If you're an honest person, then you cannot run a class with a lot of rules and no tech because everybody's going to cheat you. So I'm all for rules. Rules are good if rules are enforced. If rules aren't enforced, they might as well not even be in the rule book.
No.
So if they're, and I don't think that, rules do not. Most of the time you make a rule to try to save somebody money and it costs double.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And like I said, I want to get into that here in just a few minutes. But one thing I want to go back to is, you're a dirt racer, stock car racer. Just say that in a bubble, stock car racer. Is that something that, and we know you're very passionate about it, and you're doing very, very well for yourself. But is that something like, have you always light stock car racing, or has it hey, I love drag racing and I really like it, but yeah, I do stock cars because that's I like that too, or is it just you've always been a stock car guy?
Well, growing up, we always, just like everybody, we always watched the NASCAR stuff, and that's kind of why I went asphalt racing, and then I didn't even know what a modified was until I started going with Jimmy and Randy, and then I like that, so we got into that deal. So my favorite has always been a dirt late model. Right. That's always been my favorite. That's what to watch. It's if I'm going to a big race, I'm normally headed to the World 100 or the North-South at Florence or something like that. But here in the last couple of years, I've really got interested into watching non-wing sprints. And I guess it's because I have no interest in driving one. I'm solely a fan of those. So kind of like when I go somewhere and I watch a late model race or a modified race, I'm like, I'm always nitpicking everything. I'm like, well, this guy could have done that, or this guy could have done that, or this guy should have done that, or this guy's, you can tell by the attitude of that car what's wrong. So the whole time I'm watching mod racing or late model racing, I'm always doing that. Well, I can go to a sprint car race and I can just be a fan because I don't know nothing about them. Right. So I can sit there and I can enjoy myself and what happens. And I've got a couple guys I like in that deal. With us racing up at Bloomington a lot, we pitted beside Kevin Thomas Jr. a whole lot, right. And he's kind of he's progressed, and he's one of the top guys in the USAC deal now. And I'm pretty good, not good enough friends. We don't call and talk or nothing, but when we see each other out, we know each other, and I really like that guy. And there's just a couple guys I've met up there at Bloomington that have kind of moved on and run the USAC stuff. I like to watch them, and I've just become a big fan of that non-wing sprint car deal. I don't really like to watch a wing sprint car. They're so aero dependent that a wing sprint car is okay to watch on a little track, but you take that wing sprint car and go to Volusia or Eldora or someplace like that. They're cool to watch for 10 minutes because they're so dang fast. Yeah. But the racing's just not there. I don't really like to watch it. So like I said, they're cool to watch just for the speed, but I get bored with them pretty quick.
Well, and that's pretty cool how we take a guy who is enjoying success and is so dedicated to this form of racing with the U.M.P modified stock cars, and you get to just be like, hey, I'm a fan, I'm going to kick back, because we do. As drivers, and obviously I'm nowhere near the level that you're at now, but we've drove for a while, and with guys that are out there on the track, we can sit there and we nitpick those races about how, man, that car's loose. I know it's loose. That car's tight. Oh, hey, he's losing a transmission. I know it right now. Yeah. And it's crazy how we can do that. But then again, to be able to turn that off, just turn your brain off, your technical brain, and just be a fan of the non-wing sprints, because those guys are nuts sometimes, backing those cars into the corners, and that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, they look like you're probably the same way with like you can probably watch mod racing and late model racing and just be a fan of it, But if you go watch the class that you run all the time, you're always like, man, I know I can outrun that guy, or it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just a different. I don't enjoy watching mod racing. If it has nothing to do with I don't like the class. Obviously I love it. It's what I've spent most of my time doing, but I'm not relaxed when I'm watching it. Even if I'm not there at the track racing, I'm in race mode when I'm trying to watch the mod class, and I can go watch some non-wing sprints and not be that way. So
well, that's like I said, to me that is so cool that you can be able to do that and to just not overthink it, and being able to enjoy it, because we do that, and of course I went to Clarksville a couple of weeks ago with Blaze Melton, and of course I wanted to see the street race, the Pier Street race, because I want to see if I run down there, I want to know what I'm running against,
right?
And with the guy, you're just like, what, I'm going out there, I'm gonna run my car, and whoever I'm running against is just who I'm running against, because obviously, and like we'll talk about here in a few minutes, you've been in there with some pretty heavy hitters in the mod class, so. And that's pretty cool. So
yeah, we've the last I don't know, maybe 4 years we've been getting out and running more of the national stuff, and like one of the you know, I mean, one of the biggest names in mod racing is probably Kyle Strickler. You know, when we show up at a lot of races he's at, and you know, there's times we outrun that guy. You know, so to be able to go out and come from, we raced around here a lot. Probably, I guess I local raced. When I say local racing, I consider Paducah local. Tri-State Speedway. We raced Paducah, Clarksville, Cedar Ridge, Nebo when they were running a lot, Windy Hollow. You know, kind of like I say, if you're within 2 hours of your home, that's kind of local racing for a modified. So we did that for 4 or 5 years, and we got to where 2 or 3 years in a row we won a track championship at Cedar Ridge and Windy Hollow both, and then we won the U.M.P. has a regional deal where they keep, like, they put your 5 or 6 tracks in a certain region, so you're only competing against those guys at those tracks. And we won that 1 year, and then the next season I told my wife, I was like, man, it's time to, you know, it's time to move up and go see what we got against these other guys. And it's hard when you get comfortable racing 2 or 3 hours from home, and then, you know, racing 2 or 3 hours from home versus 4 to 5 hours from home. You know, you think, well, it's just double the length. It ain't that big a deal, but it's a huge deal, because now instead of just paying for fuel and pit passes, now you got to start thinking about hotels and food expenses, and when you start getting at 3.5, 4 hours from the house, you know, your expense really ramps up. So we didn't really know if we could afford it or not. So to be able to go from in 2014 wanting to get out and do this stuff to not knowing if we could even do it in a 3-year time, to being able to wrap that championship up this season, it's a huge weight off our shoulders, and it puts a lot of self-pride in what we've done. And obviously there's a lot of people along the way that have helped me do that I couldn't do it without. Mark Bush builds the best race car in the country, in my opinion, for modified racing, and Philip Oakley, the same thing with Oakley Racing Engines. For years, we've always a lot of drivers. You know, we spend so much time tuning the car. Right. You know, you're always tuning on that race car, and for the most part, you don't tune a whole lot on the engine. You know, you go the dyno, you get a tune on it, you throw it in the car, and you race all year. And one thing I've learned with Philip and Jay is they have a lot of drag racing experience. And at the drag strip, you don't really mess with the chassis a lot, but you tune on that motor all day. Yeah. So one thing that we have learned in the past season is how much we can tune that motor, not necessarily for horsepower, but to affect the handling of the race car. Yeah. There's a lot of times where we'll be free in or tighten a center or loose off or whatever, and that's some of the terms we use to describe how the car's handling. You want a good neutral balanced car. And we have learned this year a lot how to change certain aspects of the motor to manipulate the chassis. And that's played a big advantage this season, and that was something that Philip and Jay were able to bring to my program that really picked us up to put us over that hump. Mm-hmm. So you just have to, no matter how long you've done this, or no matter how many races you've won, or if you do not keep an open mind, you're going to stop where you're at. So you constantly have to be able to learn and take other people's opinion. You know, a lot of people say, well, they're drag racers, they don't know. But I was, I was really open to listening to them. And first night we went to Cedar Ridge, we had a certain gear in the car, and Philip's like, look, man, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on out there, but I know engines, and I know that motor doesn't seem like it's geared right to me. He said, won't you try this? And I said, well, I don't really think it's going to – I think it'll probably work when we get to racing, but I don't think it's going to work on a start. And he said, you can do what you want, but I think that's what it needs. And we switched over and we tried it, and man, we didn't miss a beat. I think we won like the next 2 or 3 in a row out there. So You just got to keep an open mind, and you never know where your information is going to come from. You never know who you're going to learn the next trick from or whatever.
Well, you think about the drag guys and how. Here's the thing: in a nutshell, horsepower versus traction. That relates on a drag strip, but that relates on the dirt tracks too, and the asphalt tracks, because you can overdrive those tires with the amount of horsepower some of these guys have, and the big motors or the most horsepower motors don't always win the race. I mean, depending on track conditions. So,
well, kind of what we've learned in the last couple of years is with the mod stuff. We don't have a lot of aero. They took our spoilers away. We don't have a huge tire. They switched tire compound on us. We went from a D, which is a fairly soft tire, to this new M30, which is a harder tire. So every year they're taking a little bit more traction away from these modifieds. And what we've learned to do is you still need that big horsepower when you're qualifying, when a track has a cushion. You still got to have those big numbers to get qualified, but there's so much more to a motor than the horsepower numbers or torque numbers. The way that motor acts when you're off the throttle affects that car almost as much, if not maybe a little bit more, than the way it acts when you're on the throttle. And that's one thing a lot of people overlook, and they just try to tune their chassis, where there's a lot of stuff they could do to that engine that they're overlooking.
Right. Well, and that's one of those things where, we don't have engineering degrees, and we don't have big, machines or gauges and things that will tell us things. This is stuff that you learn on the fly, and it's crazy because it's coming from an outside source like a drag racer, and that's pretty cool. The guy, obviously, we know Philip Oakley knows engines, and so that's pretty cool how he can just see that and envision it and just say, just try it, man. See what happens. If it's wrong, it's wrong. We'll go back. If I'm right, hey, then I've helped you out.
Yeah, they're like I said, they're a very valuable asset to our program, and like I said, we've been pretty competitive the last several years, but I really do feel like that's the only thing that has changed in the last season. Everything else was same type of. Obviously, I changed teams, but I stayed in the same type of car that I had been running previously. So I really feel like that's the one aspect that put us over the top and was able to get us that championship wrapped up. I won some of the biggest races of my career this year, and like I said, to win that championship, and it's my most successful year to date. So I'm real pleased with what those guys have done for me, and without them and Mark Bush Race Cars and all of our other backers, it wouldn't be possible.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand about U.M.P modified chassis or just modified chassis in general, and it's not something I deal with. But all these all these chassis builders, depending on what you're in, they all want to do things a little different, and each chassis, while in effect the car is sort of the same, they're different, and whereas the Mark Bush race cars might be different than the Larry Shaw race cars or the Longhorn chassis or different stuff. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you can speak to that. I may be talking off base, but it seems like to me that they've all got their own formula.
Yeah, they do. When you're one thing for someone that's just kind of coming in or someone that's struggling a little bit, one of the most important things about this deal is you've got to pick. Don't get me wrong. You got to think on your own and do your own stuff. But when you're learning and you're new, you need to pick one person and do everything they tell you to do. Because you can't call Mark Bush and then turn around and call David Strimmy with Lethal Chassis, and then turn around and call Labani's with Longhorn Chassis, and each one of them guys knows things that work on their cars, but they're not going to cross reference. The cars are so different. That's what's really kind of fun about this modified series that we run, is the rules are so open that you don't have to stay in one little box. Every car is different. I think that's kind of a lot of the reason why NASCAR has lost a lot of its fan base, and a lot of the reason why it's kind of coming over, NASCAR's falling off and dirt racing's growing. Don't get me wrong, I like both of them, but facts are facts. And I think it's because they've put everybody in this little bitty box in the NASCAR deal, and every single car you look at, there might be small things that are different, and if you really know what you're looking at, then you'll see the differences. But the average fan, every one of them cars look the same.
Right. And
you go to a dirt track, and every one of them's different. Obviously, all Mark Bush cars are the same, all lethal cars are the same, so forth. But there's so much you can do with the rules. Like our rear suspension stuff, there essentially are no rules. There's a few small things, but what those guys are doing, you try to put it on one of these cars, and it's just not the same. So the main thing is you got to get your car balanced. You got to get it, you got to get it to where it maneuvers well. And if you do that, then you usually got a pretty good piece.
Well, that's pretty neat. How and we talk about the stock cars, the cruisers, the street stocks, pier stocks, whatever, what have you, and how everybody, of course, you have to build that car yourself, and it's a full frame car, or half frames, whatever, depending on what you're running. But that stuff is a little harder. And I'm not saying harder from the standpoint of maybe getting it to handle, other than we don't have a lot of adjustment unless you put in wedge bolts or things like that. A lot of times, I know on my car personally, I don't have that stuff. And it's just not something I've ever put in my car. But I adjust a lot with tire stagger and air pressure, whereas, you guys can move traction bars up and down, and, the positions of what they call J bars for people that may not know about modified suspension. And it's different. It's just completely different.
There's so much stuff to adjust on these cars that I really got kind of lucky that I come in. When I first started mod racing, we were all on 3-link stuff. It would be really hard to come into this world right now and learn everything, because it's advanced so much in the last 10 years. If you don't have a guideline to go by, or someone that has been in it for quite a while that knows what's going on, you could get lost really quick.
Well, I tell you what, buddy, let's just go ahead and throw it to a commercial real quick. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side with Josh Harris.
Let's face it, we love racing, and we need to keep those race machines in tip-top shape to stay competitive. That's why we rely on Mach 5 Race Cars and Parts, located at 2035 West 2nd Street in Owensboro, Kentucky. They specialize in stock cars, but you'll find all the parts you need for your racing go-karts as well. They are your go-to experts for parts, wheels, tires, fuel, and a wide array of other items to keep you on the track. They have hundreds of parts in stock and can special order thousands of others. Give John Hayden a call today at 270-240-5587.
And we're back from the break, and we're here with Josh Harris, the driver of the number 22 U.M.P. Open Wheel Modified. Josh, I want to ask you now about some of your favorite drivers. I know you've seen some over the years, and had family involved in motorsports and things. And do you have any that you just look up to, that you're like, what, that guy's the gold standard. He was my hero, or still my hero. Things like that.
Yeah, a few. I really Randy Cordy was always one of my favorites in the late model. Back in the early days when I grew up watching that stuff, and it's pretty cool because a couple years ago, me and Randy met at the racetrack, and we've actually become pretty good friends over the years. And I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was on my birthday, and I get a message on my phone. I look up, and it's Randy Cordy. It says, "Hey, dude, happy birthday." So I sent him back a text. I said, "Are you kidding me? Randy Cordy's actually telling me happy birthday?" I said, "I can't believe this." But we actually talk quite often, and I've always looked up to him, and he was one of my favorites before I actually knew him. But now that I've got to know him, I like him even more. I was always a Stevie Francis fan. Just because I thought he had a cool name, was the Kentucky Colonel. That's what everybody always called him. And then, like I told you, in the non-wing sprint stuff, I like Kevin Thomas Jr. And that's really about it. I didn't really watch a lot of the mod racing stuff before I actually, I only knew about it a couple years before I was in it, so I didn't really follow a whole lot of people. I never really went to the dirt track a whole lot when I was younger. It's just I was always at the track. I started racing go-karts when I was 10 years old, so when most people were hanging out at the track, I was at the go-kart track, so I didn't really get to – I hear a lot of people talking about, some of the older guys at Whitesville. Of course, Frankie and Bruce, I always looked up to them too. I was always fans of them, but other than that, there's nobody that really sticks out that I followed from a kid all the way up to now, other than probably Randy.
Well, that's pretty neat, and for him to be, especially out of the blue like that, just to hit you with that birthday message. I mean, that had to make you feel special.
Yeah, we're pretty good friends. We talk probably a couple times a month or whatever, and so it's a pretty cool deal. Like I said, I was a fan of him before I knew him, and now that I know him, I like him even more. So.
Well, whereas the landscape has changed, from when we were kids, we're fairly close in age, and around the same time grew up. Around the racetracks, and I remember some of the older guys too, but I guess it's different now when you get older and you're able to interact with them, and especially now the social media age, to where everybody can connect from hundreds of miles away. You can kind of stay in contact with some of these other guys that are racing, and even some of the legends, and be able to get advice and things like that from them.
Yeah, it's really neat to. It's really neat to. One thing that's pretty cool is I've always looked up to Mark Bush.
Right.
I can remember 4 or 5 years ago, I used to read every. People that don't know Mark Bush's background is he is him and a guy named Jim Scale started AFCO Racing Products. Mm-hmm. So anybody that's in the racing industry knows who AFCO Racing Product is. So Mark Bush and Jim Scale started that company. Then Mark come up with a school called Racewise Chassis School. Mm-hmm. So I used to read every article that Mark would write. He does a publication for there's Dirt Late Model Digest and Dirt Modified Digest. He always does tech articles in those magazines. And for years I'd always read all those, and I always thought, man, I really want to go to that class, but in the middle of winter, right around Christmas, it was $400 to go to. It was just kind of hard to come up with at the time. So the first year that I drove for Scott Clippinger, he said, hey, would you like to go to Mark's class? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. He said, well, I'll pay for it. So he sent me over to that class, and he had already had a car ordered from Mark, because that was the Mark had basically, it was kind of, Mark sold AFCO Racing Products and started Mark Bush Race Cars. Right. So Mark Bush Race Cars were still kind of new at the time. But he had some pretty big names in his car. Matt Kinder and Matt Meavert were both running Mark Bush cars, and they were always fast everywhere. So I'm sitting there, and I finally get to meet Mark and whatever, and now me and Mark are best friends. I talk to him almost every single day. I'm driving his race car, so it's crazy to think that. It's kind of how, in such a short period of time, going from, man, I would just like to be able to meet and sit down and talk to this guy, to I met him, I've talked to him, and now I'm driving his race car. Right. I mean, that is, people just need, people that are out there and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting for that break. Just never give up. Just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, because, I've raced cars for 20 years before I really feel like I've had the breaks that I've had in the last 3 or 4, and it's just really strange that the people that you look up to, and they're almost famous to you, and now you can call them your friends. Yeah. It's really a unique situation to be in. It's really cool, and you never know when that, no matter what class you're racing or what track you're racing at, you just never know when that opportunity is going to come up, to that one thing that you really want is going to break through for you. You just got to, if there's something in your heart, you got to follow it. God put that there for a reason, and he's going to make things happen. And, I'm just really a big believer in whatever that dream is. You got to chase it and never give up. And it may take 2 years for it to to break through and get what you're working for, and it may take 10, but if it's there and you work at it long enough and hard enough, it's going to happen.
Well, I had a different question loaded up for us past that one, but I since you brought it up, we always ask, our drivers or whoever we have on, what advice would you give somebody starting out that doesn't, grasp it yet, or is still, quote unquote, spinning their wheels in their form of motorsports? What advice would you give, and based on your life experience too?
When you ask that question, do you mean like setup wise or well,
I guess we were talking about hard work and how it did take you quite a while of racing different series and just being at the track, working hard, nights in the garage. That's invaluable, and we preached about it earlier, preparedness. But that's kind of what I want to touch on is, somebody starting out in the world of racing, some of these young kids that we've got coming to the track, that want to get into it.
There's several different ways you can look at this. If you want to get to the level where we're at, where you're traveling and you're on a national stage, and there's, if you want to get to that point, if there's anything else in your life you want to do it, because you don't have time to do this and anything else.
Yeah.
Me and my wife, we work a full-time job. We're lucky enough that it's a family business. We work with her parents and her sister. So we're lucky enough to where if we want to get away and go race for the weekend, if everything's not finished up on Friday, we can break away a little early. So I'm very thankful to have that. But there's some people that just want to have this as a hobby, and that's great. Yeah. If that's what they want to do, then, I've got a good buddy, Keith Torrance. He's one of my good sponsors, Keith Drywall. And, he loves to fish and he loves to race. So he don't take it real serious. And when he wants to go fishing, he goes fishing. When he wants to go racing, he goes racing. And that's another way to look at it. I'm really not wired that way.
Right.
Kind of the way I am is whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to put 110% effort in it, and I'm not going to be out here doing 5 different things. I'm going to put 100% of my energy in one thing, and that's what we're going to do. And if you want to race local and you're okay with if you're the type of guy that can go to the track and be like, hey, we won tonight, great, and hey, we run 6 tonight, great. If you can do that, then that's a great way to look at it. Just do it as a hobby and something to do for fun. I can't do that. If we go somewhere and we run 6th, it eats me up. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just the way I am. Mm-hmm. And so it takes every bit of energy, focus, determination, every resource you can come up with. You have to be 110% racing all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think at an early stage in your career, you have to kind of decide which one of them people you're going to be. And if you want to be like, if you want to be the guy that's 110% in, don't worry about. Like I told you earlier, there's been times where I started building a car and I had absolutely no money to finish this thing. Mm-hmm. I knew that I had no money to finish this car. So we start on it, and you build it as you get it, and things will come up. When people see you trying, when people see you putting in 110% effort, when people see you representing yourself in a good way, then people will want to help. People see you don't give up, they'll want to help. It may take a while, and it may not. It may happen quick, but the one thing that you can do when you're starting off, you just have to decide you're either 110% in or you're in it to have fun, and either way is fine, Yeah. But it's if you've got you'll know it if you feel it. I mean, if you got that drive, you got that determination, if it's there, freaking chase it. If you got a dream, chase it. Don't be one of these guys that you're 40, 45 years old and you're thinking, man, I wish I'd have done that.
Yeah.
Go do it right now while you can.
And you bring up a lot of good points there. Is there are two types of racers? Well, it's probably 3 or 4 different types, but you think one side or the other, one side of the coin or the other is you've got the guys who are making it more of a career versus the guys who are more hobby racers. I'm kind of stuck in that bubble. Just haven't taken the big steps, but putting a race car together and trying to get out there when we can, due to work things and home things. It's hard sometimes for those guys, but you're right. Maybe their version of chasing the dream is they get to do that for now, but you're right. You have to, and you said it could take a while. It could happen overnight. But you've always got to have those eyes open for that opportunity. You got to have your head nose to the grindstone, but your head in the clouds a little bit, and you got to be watching for those opportunities because you never know when one will present itself.
Yeah, and another thing, there's so many people out here that will try to discourage you. You got to go to the racetrack for yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't be at the racetrack for any other reason than it's for yourself because. It's sad to say, but we live in a society that craves on other people's failure. People's hobby is pointing out people's faults, and you got to block all that stuff out because the more you get out, the more you're in the public spotlight, the more people know you, the more critics that show up. Mm-hmm. So you got to learn how to just block them people out. Just not pay attention to it. You got to know what you want to do and that you're doing it right. And, you got to really get a thick skin and really learn to ignore a lot of people.
Right.
And like I said, as many critics that show up, the right people show up too. So yeah. It's a tough deal. You got to learn how to block people out. It's just the way it is.
Well, and that's a great point. And, I've seen you at the racetrack several nights, especially down at Cedar Ridge. You guys don't stray far from the trailer. I've seen you go get some food, but most of the time you're checking the track out, but you're right there at that race car. You're doing work. You're, getting the tires ready. We're trying to, adjust on the car and this and that and the other. And I guess that, you have to be your own man, you know what I mean? And you're right. You have to blaze your own path. And those people, you will. You're exactly right. You're going to have the quote-unquote haters and critics. But that's really good advice to somebody is, hey, do your thing.
Yeah.
Run your race, run your car. You finish 6th, that's your burden, and that's something you're going to deal with. You don't need anybody else telling you, hey, man, you finished 6th. That wasn't a real good run.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't make any difference. I know in my heart what it was.
Yeah.
Whether it was a good run, it was a good effort. Hey, I did all I could do. And nobody knows that besides you in that driver's seat.
Yeah. And we did a show a couple weeks ago with Eddie Campbell. We did his show. I forget exactly what it's called. But
I think Track Talk Thursdays?
Track Talk Thursday,
Is that what it is, Eddie
with Eddie. And, he was like, man, who's that? When you show up, who's that one guy you want to beat? Who's that one guy, And I'm like, man, there's not. When we go to the racetrack, we're not worried about who's there. We're not. We go to a lot of big races. We go to a lot of races where there's 75, 80 cars. And if you're focused on that one guy, then there's 10 more that can beat you.
Yeah.
So you got to know your car. You got to go in there with your blinders on. You got to, if there's a car in front of you or if you're lucky enough to be the leader and you're coming up on lap traffic or whatever, you got to get to the point of where who's sitting in that race car doesn't psych you out. All them cars look the same. All them cars out there are, you don't pay attention to who's in that car. Now, that's not 100% true because each person that you race has different characteristics, and after you learn those people that you're racing against, you know the characteristics of how they drive, and you have to pay attention to that part of it. but you can't let it psych you out of who that person is or what that person's won or what that person's accomplished. That's not something you can be thinking about when you pull up behind somebody and you're trying to get around them. You know the characteristics of what they do, how they drive. That stuff you have to know, you have to pay attention to, and you can use that to your advantage. But you can't let that psych you out of, right. Hey, we've raced with Austin and Ty Dillon. That's Daytona 500 champions. But when we're down there in that car, he's just another modified competitor.
That's right.
It's not when we're racing with those guys, it's not. You can't let that stuff psych you out, and if you do, you beat yourself.
Yeah.
So and there's enough people to beat out there to try to enough people out there trying to beat you to beat yourself. Well,
so that's what I was going to bring up is the one that you don't want to beat is yourself.
Yeah.
And I know personally, and I can speak to that, is I have fell in that box before, rolling through that gate, and we're getting there, we're getting our car off the trailer, and we're doing good, and we're all getting everything ready for the races. And then X person will show up, and you're like, oh, God, man, I wish that guy hadn't showed up. But you know what, though? Here's the thing. What that person has accomplished or what they haven't or what have you, you're right. You can't let it psych you out because here's the thing. Maybe he is on a different level than you are, but that's the level you want to be at. And there's no way, there's no better way than racing the best to get better, And I think that's pretty cool how you talk about the game that and a lot of people don't understand the game of racing. And when you're in that seat, you're paying attention to that guy in front of you, and you're looking at where, okay, he's loose on this corner, he's tight off that corner, and I know he likes to go to the high side late in the race and stuff. So you already know this, but of course, then the other side of that is they know your characteristics too, and I think that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, it's you got to know. You gotta know your competition, but you gotta know your stuff. You gotta know your cars. That's the most important thing, is knowing where your car runs. So it's a lot of stuff you can use to your advantage, and it's nothing that the only way to get it is race those guys.
Yeah.
Seat time, the more time you can be in a car with that great competition around you, then the better you're going to be.
Well, it is, this class, the U.M.P. Modified class and different series of the same cars is stone cold. I mean, these guys are tough, and they're tough at any racetrack. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a Cedar Ridge Speedway, Windy Hollow Speedway, all the way up to Bloomington, Eldora, Peevely, Missouri, just different places. I mean, these guys are tough, and that firsthand.
Everywhere in the country you go with this type of car, and that's another thing I like about this, is we can race just about anywhere and not have to change a lot of stuff. So that's another thing I like about this class. But just about anywhere you go, you have those guys that you have to beat. You go to you go around here, like it's not any easier to win at Cedar Ridge than it is at any of these big races.
Yeah.
The only difference is where if you're a little bit off at Cedar Ridge on a local, and I say Cedar Ridge because that's where I'm at on a local night. I'm not at these other tracks on local nights, so it's the same for those tracks on a local night. So like if you're at a track where, say, it's a local night and there's only 20 cars there, and you're a little bit off, then there's 4, 5, 6 guys that can beat you.
Right.
Where when you go to these big races where there's 80 or 90 cars and you're a little bit off, well, now instead of having to worry about 4 or 5 guys beating you, you have to worry about even being able to get into the A main. We went to Farmer City last year, 40 or 50 cars. The top 10 cars, the top 12 cars were within 1/10 of a second qualifying. So when everybody's that much on their game, it's not any harder to win. There's just so many more people that can win.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're at a local track and you mess up, you worry about 1 or 2 cars getting around you. If you're there and you mess up, you worry about going from 5th to freaking 15th, and it'll happen in a lap. I mean, that's how competitive it is when you get to these bigger races, when you have 50, 60 cars. So it's pretty amazing that, a dirt circle track, 4 turns, 2 straightaways, and there's 12 cars that making that exact same circle within a tenth of a second. That is unreal.
That is unreal, and that's something that we've talked about, and we got to talking before the show, as at no disadvantage to yourself. Some of the heartbreakers, and we've all had them. Lost them just pure. It just happens. Things, circumstance, victim of circumstances. And Richard Petty always said, you can put yourself in a position to win all day long, but circumstances will dictate the outcome. And I've seen it personally, a couple of heartbreakers, but that guy is just so close, and he's ready to pounce. And if those tires give up, even that 1/10 like you're talking about, man, it's hard to maintain like that.
Yeah, it is. It's just you got to be on your game, and that's just part of that preparation we were talking about earlier. If there's no one thing that can win you a race, but there's 1,000 little things that can cost you one. So I mean, it's a tough deal. It's if you want to be at one of the top, whatever. When I say top level, I mean whatever class you run. I don't care if it's go-karts, mini stocks, cruisers, whatever. The guys that win in those classes are on their game. Their stuff is prepared. You're not going to be a guy that just does it for the heck of it and shows up prepared and beat the top guys in any class. So when I say the top, I don't really mean the top. I don't really mean any class. I mean the top of whatever class you're in. Those guys that win week in and week out that everybody think is cheating. Most of the time you show up at a racetrack and the guys winning are probably have the most legal car at the racetrack. Because they're just that much prepared.
How many times have we heard that? If he's outrunning me, I know he's cheating. And this, that, and the other. But no, and like I said, I want to get into that in a few minutes. But that falls back on some of your tech stuff, but you're right. I've talked to guys, and Bryce Jewell got a big rap last year. He just had good stuff, but that's the thing. Yeah, he had good stuff, but look at the guy that's driving the car. You look at some of the stuff he's been in, and he's honed his driving skills. You can't take that away from him.
Yeah, and it's everybody that is at the top of their class has good stuff. That's just the way it is. And when you have a guy that's prepared every week and he's used to, Bryce come from racing like what we do. Right. So when you go from working on the car 40, 50 hours a week, well, now he can put 25 hours a week in that car and feels like he's on vacation. Yeah. Where for the other guys in that class, if they work 15 hours a week on their car, they feel like they don't have a life. Yeah. So it's all in perspective, So it's just and he, I watched Bryce a lot. Me and Bryce, we're friends, and so I was in his pit a lot when he was racing there, and he had good stuff, but that car was prepared. Yeah. That's what beat him. It was how prepared the car was.
I know it beat me. I'll tell you that much. But that's pretty cool how we can circle back and put it into a box that way. I think we should, again, like you said, I want to echo that. You're right. It just because it's the U.M.P modified series or the U.M.P late models or crates or whatever.
And one other thing I want to say about that is you can't fault a guy for building a car to the best the rules will allow. That's kind of what you're supposed to do. Yeah. You've got this set of rules here. It's kind of going back to Bryce. You got this set of rules here, and those rules are there for a reason. So, that's kind of what this deal is about. It's not just about the driver. It's about the mechanics. It's about the people putting the cars together. Build that car to the best that the rules will allow. And that's part of the team. It's not just about if Bryce was a better driver than anybody else. He had the whole combination, Right. He's a good driver. He built a car to the best of the rules, and they won a lot with it. So exactly right. It's you can't fault a guy for that.
No, not at all. And I raced, and I saw it firsthand because I was on the track with him, and it was. Not that saying we're not prepared, but, again, it's just a difference in maybe the way my car was built and the way his car was built, but he had the stuff, and you're right. It was a combination of everything.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, and what I wanted to say there was, too, was we talk about, when you reach the top, and you're right. That maybe that is the top of the rusty boat class. Maybe that is the top of the mini stock class or the go-kart, whatever class you're running in that series. But you're right. There's always going to be the top guy in your class, and that's what you need to focus on. It's not, well, one day I want to get to modified. Well, maybe street stock is what you're meant to do, and you need to strive to be the man in the street stock class.
Yeah.
And if that's the guy that you got to beat, well, then you need to learn what he's doing, how they're doing their stuff, and go for it,
Yeah, it's you just gotta strive to be the best at whatever it is you're doing. Just like you said, it's whatever class you're in, and you just need to strive to be the best at that.
Yeah. And again, hey, real quick, we're absolutely not knocking Bryce Jewell because he had an amazing season. He did very, very well for himself, and again, like I said, top of the game. And you're right. It makes the difference when you cross all your T's and dot your I's. It makes the difference. So that's pretty cool. Us drivers, and I feel like I can sit in here and talk to you about driving, but we got some quirky things that we do, and I just wanted to ask you real quick, your race day rituals. Do you have anything that you just got to do on a race day because either you're superstitious or that's the way we did it last week? We've always done it that way. Are you meticulous about things in that, or do you?
No, really not. You just got, like I said, no matter if you've raced last night or last week, you got to make sure stuff's prepared. So you have to go over the car. Kind of one things we do when we're out on the road, we like to, we try to get the car, like at the end of the night when we're done racing, we try to get the car to a point of where we know that we don't have to show up to the track till about 1 o'clock. So, we'll kind of sleep a little late, and then we'll go out and get a pretty good lunch, and then go to the track and make sure that race day, we try to make it to where race day all we really have to do is go over everything and check everything. So a lot of times we'll do our repair work or whatever the night of at the track. Sometimes that don't work out. Sometimes you're thrashing right up till race time, but we don't really have anything. The only thing superstitious, and it's not really me as much as it is my wife, but I mean, if there's a speck of green on that car, she is getting it off.
Man.
We've all heard that. If there's a blade of grass on that thing, it's coming off. So she is, and I mean, honestly, just about every car that we have wrecked bad has had green on it. So, I mean, I'm not really superstitious, but it does kind of seem that way. When I first started driving Scott Clippinger's car, I mean, first 2 or 3 nights in that thing, man, second night out, I flipped it at Tri-City. Third night out, we were at Tri-State Speedway and just tore the heck out of it. And we come back in, and Kristen's like, the whole car, the whole paint scheme was black and green. Kristen's like, this green has got to go. And we did. We stripped it all down, took all the green off of it, and we kind of took off after that, and we had a pretty good couple seasons with those guys. So, and we really didn't tear up a whole lot of stuff, but I can agree with her. Every time we have green on a car, and then it usually doesn't turn out too good for us.
Well, and I know maybe a lot of people, not around stock car racing, that in general, a lot of people have always heard, and now I will say that my buddy Teddy Revelant won 26 features in a green car, and it was Get 'em Green and black.
Well, I mean, look at Jimmy Owens and Scott Bloomquist. I mean, they're always green, and they're the best you get. So evidently that bug don't hit everybody. But
yeah. But I've always heard that, green on a race car, and they talk about, sometimes that you don't put spouses' names on them or
every car I've had, I put in the cockpit with me right there by my Kristen's name's always in the cockpit with me. So I mean, all that other stuff's not really.
Yeah.
It's main, and it's more her than it is me with the superstition. But I mean, if there's a every now and then you'll hear her under the car with a impact, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm changing this body bolt. I'm like, why? It's nothing wrong with it. It's green. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we've got to put the blue one in here now. Yeah. We can't have the green bolt in.
Okay.
Well, that's pretty neat to know that, and that's something I know that I've heard a lot. But right now, I hate to break up the fun, but what we need to do is we need to pay a few bills, and we're going to go to a commercial break. We're going to come back, and we're going to get into our favorite topic, the state of racing. So we'll be back with Josh Harris in just a minute.
Are you looking for a hometown barbershop specializing in the best haircuts in Western Kentucky? If so, Master Barber Chad Thompson has everything you need to keep you looking sharp for not only your special occasions, but for everyday wear as well. Offering a line of hair care products to take care of your hair in between cuts, walk-ins are always welcome, and you're always going to find friends and neighbors at Chad's. You can find him at 10655 Highway 764 in Whitesville, or you can give him a call at 270-903-8183.
Here we are back from the break again. We got to talking while the commercial was playing there about some of the good stories that you had from the track, and you were getting ready to lead into one with the Westerfield boys and what was it, Rusty Allison and yourself?
Well, used to years ago, I'd go up to Jimmy and Randy's body shop, and they'd always have an old car, and we'd jump in the old car, and we'd go out through the woods and whatever, just act goofy in it. And one night last year, me and Kristen, we had been racing all weekend, and we were going to end the night at the weekend at Windy Hollow. So instead of getting the car ready here at the shop, we just I don't even think we'd been home yet. So we got to the track early, 11:30, 12 o'clock or whatever, and we were out there by ourselves. We was out there working. Of course, Jimmy and Randy was over there working on the track, and then Rusty Allison had just pulled up, and he was standing there in my pits, and here comes Randy, and they had a couple scrapper cars out there, I guess, that they were just, I guess people just parked them there, or maybe they were Jimmy and Randy's, I'm not sure what it was, but Randy pulls up in this Lexus, and Jimmy's in the passenger seat, and he hollers at me and says, "Hey, you want to go for a ride?" And I'm like, "Well, heck yeah. Well, I know what's about to happen." Yeah. And Rusty Allison's like, "Hey, I'll go too." And Rusty didn't have a clue what was about to happen. No. So we go down the backstretch. So we jump onto the track. Randy's driving. We go down the backstretch of the dirt track, probably 65, 70 mile an hour, all hung out. Rusty's done started praying for us all. And then we go over on the drag strip. We bust through all the weeds back there. And this old Lexus he's got, the thing will fly, but the left front tire's rubbing like crazy, smoking. And we get a run. We go down the the drag strip's got trees growed up on it, and it's asphalt's all busted.
Yeah, it's a sad thing,
and
but yeah.
We bust down the drag strip, and all four of us, and this old Lexus bouncing all over the place with the tire rubbing, and we probably run 80 mile an hour down through there, and then we get to the end of it, and Randy pulls the emergency brake. We're doing donuts at the end of the drag strip. In this old Lexus. And then anyway, we go around there and act a little goofy, and Rusty's has no clue if none of us really know if we're going to make it out of this thing. And Jimmy said a few things or whatever. But anyway, the funny part of the story is we get back back to the pit area, and Rusty Allison jumps out and grabs his heart pills and takes 2 heart pills, and it's just you just never know what you're gonna get into around there.
You can't give the preacher man a heart attack. And well, if you had to have somebody riding with you, it was the man with the connection upstairs, yeah. For sure. So yeah, especially on a ride like that. But that's stuff that that's stuff that you can only hear, and only stuff that'll happen. And the cool thing about it is, you're friends with them, but it was cool that you were there already, and being able to just kick back, because race days are stressful.
Yeah.
But something like that, you got to kick back, go have a little fun for a few minutes.
So yeah, my wife and all them, they're over there getting the car ready, and we're over in this old Lexus doing donuts in the parking lot, throwing grass all over the place, and it's a fun time. You never know what you're gonna get into. We used to fool the ride and stuff a lot together, and it's not just I'm not just friends with them at the racetrack. We do a lot of stuff together through the years and had a lot of good times. So.
Well, that's pretty cool, and especially we talk about it's a family. The racing family is a family, and whether you're related or you're not, we're all connected by something that we love, and to be able to do that and to stay friends and to be able to share those moments is pretty cool.
Yeah. I remember one time I was up there at their shop, and Scott Slayton took us all to lunch one day for some reason, and So we were in this parking lot, and
Scott Slate,
and we were in this parking lot, and it was Scott was driving. It was me and Jimmy and Randy in the passenger seat, and Scott takes off wide open to this like embankment, like he's gonna jump it, and he's like, and he gets almost there, and he locks the brakes up and stops. He's like, I forgot who I was riding with. I was trying to scare the whole bunch of you, and we's all hanging on. We's ready to hit it.
Yeah.
We're all like, yeah, let's go. And Scott was like, he's like, I was just trying to scare y'all, and we all just kind of laughed at him.
Yeah, you wasn't going to scare that bunch. I mean, heck, we did that last week. You know what I mean? so, well, that's pretty neat. And like I said, you talk about real quick the scrapper deal, and we talked to Jake Shown about that last episode and how that's kind of taken off. Just as, if somebody wants to get in there in a $200 or $300 car and beat around and have some fun, but you can also kind of get a little bit of racing experience doing that.
I've seen this, and you've probably seen it as well. But if you remember, I think the Rusty Boats actually started off as a scrapper. Then the Rusty Boats got a little bit faster, and then they had the Cruiser that started off as that, or maybe I said that backwards. Maybe it was the Cruiser first. But I think what they need to do is that's a cool deal, but they need to keep it at a stock car, or in 6 years down the road, the people that are running a Cruiser type car right now are going to be calling them scrappers.
Yeah.
Because it's always like they drop the top class. When we're talking about the full body car classes, it just does it over and over. They drop the top class and then open up the rules for each other class, and they grow and grow and grow, and then they add a little stock car class,
right.
and then 2 years later they drop the top class. So it's like the names are just constantly changing, but the classes are the same. So I think they need to just that's a cool deal, but they need to keep it what it is. Don't
right.
Don't
mess
let
with it
them
too much.
Don't let them start modifying them and stuff like that. And I think it'll be a pretty neat deal. But if they do, it'll get out of hand like about everything else.
Well, that's a great segue, because I wanted to get into the state of racing locally. When you think about the local tracks, and again, it can be a couple of hours away, it being local tracks like you were talking about earlier. What do you think the state of racing locally is? I mean, is it strong? Is it suffering? Do they do too much with the classes to where we've got too many, or they rotate them around too much, or what's your feelings?
Obviously, it's not as strong as it has been in, say, early 2000. I do think it's coming back a little bit. It's not as weak as it has been in the past either. If you look around, the local tracks that have the biggest following, the best car count, the best foundation, is not necessarily the tracks that pay the most. It's not necessarily the tracks that have the most classes or whatever, but it's the tracks that have been around the longest without changing ownership, without changing, without a lot of change. Clarksville Speedway has probably has like some of the biggest car counts around, and I mean, without knocking them, but honestly, they pay probably worse than anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, but everybody there knows that if they build a car and they don't get it done for 2 years, 2 years from now, that track is still going to be racing more than likely, because they have a history of, as long as I can remember, Clarksville's raced every year. I think what has hurt the tracks around here is that they change hands so often. Everybody's kind of afraid to build a car because they don't know if the track's going to be open next year. If you can take, I'm kind of out of touch with what it takes to build a Cruiser or Rusty
Right.
Boat or whatever. So let's just say it takes $8,000. Maybe it's more than that, maybe it's less than that. I don't really know. But if you can take $8,000 and spend it on a car that you're going to get to play with and use for the next 5 or 6 years, that's not that big of an investment. But if you take that money and you build a car and you think, well, I might get to run it this year, and then next year I might not have a place to race it unless I want to drive to an hour away.
Right.
There's I think that's what's hurt the racing around here more than anything. You hear everybody say it's the economy or whatever, and I mean, the economy, maybe it is a little bit that, but I think the biggest deal is, we go up into Illinois and race a lot, and most of those tracks we go to up there have been around, same owners, and man, the state of racing up there is good.
Yeah.
B mod classes has 30 cars. Street stock classes have 30 cars. I mean, just about every class is full field cars, and I think one of the big reasons is because they're established. You go up there and watch cars, and you can tell those cars have been around a long time. So I think another thing that kind of hurts racing around here a little bit, I'm not a promoter. I don't want to be a promoter. Don't pretend to be a promoter. Right. So, anybody can sit back and tell people what they're doing wrong.
Oh, exactly.
But until you're in that situation, I don't know 100%. But just from what I see when I'm off racing other places, it seems like the tracks that have the biggest car counts, they have one full body class that's like sort of stock.
Yeah.
And then they have one full body class that's like a modified class, like a street stock class where you can do a little more. I don't go too many places where they have 4 classes of cars where all the cars look alike.
Yeah.
I do go to a lot of places where they'll have like a mini stock and then a mini modified. So you got a like kind of a slower 4-cylinder and a faster 4-cylinder.
Yep.
Then you have kind of a slower full body stock car, a faster full body stock car. Then you have a B mod and an A mod. That's what they call them up in Illinois, which is kind of like our E mod and U.M.P mods.
Right.
So they have 6 classes, but there's only 2 classes of each type of car. So I think if they did a little bit more of that, or they maybe combined a few of the classes, you're probably going to take a few people off in the beginning. But I think overall that would probably be a little better because, I've been around racing a long time, and there's a lot of times I'm sitting in the stands at Windy Hollow, at Cedar Ridge. Is Nebo opening this year? What's going on down there?
I haven't heard. I kind of heard some rumblings, but I think it's kind of fell by the wayside. I thought that maybe the Castiles were going to, but we're not quite sure.
At those 3 tracks, I'm sitting in the stands, and the only reason I can tell the difference in a class is because I know this person, and I know that's the class he runs.
Right.
If I was an average fan that come out there and was just setting up in the grandstands and knew anybody, I would feel like I just watched 4 classes of cars that were all the same.
Right.
Where maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know, but just from being up in areas where the racing is really, when you pull in the pit area and the pit areas are full like they used to be around here, that's what I'm seeing.
Those days, but
yeah, that's what I'm seeing is, there's just 2 classes where cars look similar, a faster and a slower. So.
Well, and I want to take a quick example of that, and not to throw, our co-host Wes under the bus, but he's only been to the racetrack a couple of times, and wants to go more times. Obviously, just been the winter time, but he's been to the track a couple of times, and he's asked me the question before: "Is this the class you run?" No, man. Them are the bombers.
Yeah.
Oh, is this the class you run? No, man. Them are the rusty bolts.
Yeah.
And he's like,
I mean, that's my point.
Well, they all
exactly.
look similar. You know what I mean? And it's all Monte Carlos or Fords or Caprices or what have you. But that again, you can classify him right now as where he's learning, but he's the average fan. He's the guy that, hey, you brought him to the racetrack. He doesn't know a whole lot about it. Just wants to go have fun. But then again, you see 14 classes of the same car. You know what I mean? So. And it's pretty cool. I think maybe at Windy Hollow they're trying to get those cars down to where they're in boxes on each class. Yeah. But
I know a lot of guys that run those classes, but like I said, I'm not familiar with the cars. I don't know how easy that would be. I'm talking out of I'm kind of talking out of content. Because I don't know if those classes could even be combined. So. I don't really know a whole lot about them. Like I was telling you earlier, I think before we was on the air, I've drove some street stock cars and stuff, but that was back when I run asphalt.
Yeah.
I've never even turned a lap in on a dirt track. The only thing I've ever been in is a modified or a late model. I've never even, so I really don't know a whole lot about them other than what I'm kind of an outsider looking in on that stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, to go back to something, and I said we were going to get into it. You started talking about the tech portion of it. teching these cars is your, again, you hit it right on the head. That's a big thing. And I think some of that might fall by the wayside too, with the track ownership changing hands a lot during the years. But and even in the modified class, you guys are dictated by a set of rules, a standard set of rules, by the United Midwest Promoters, and even IMS may have their own specific rules that they run for their class. I don't know, that'd be something for you to shed light on, but you're used to those guys looking those cars over,
Yeah, the AMS is the exact same rule package as the U.M.P modified. Actually, when we run an AMS race, we're still running for U.M.P points.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of work together. The American Modified Series is kind of the touring series of U.M.P modified, if that makes any sense.
Does,
so it's the same type of car. It's just it's kind of like a national. It's kind of like a national deal, but where like for the U.M.P national points, you can race for national points at any track, and you will gain national points. For the AMS series, you have to be at that race at that track at that night. That's how it varies from like the national points. So, like say I know Mike Harrison is always one of the top guys in the national points, and say Ray Bollinger. Well, those guys can be battling for national points, but they can be at two different racetracks. Right. They don't even have to be at the same racetrack racing to be battling for national points, where in the AMS, it's not like that. If there's an AMS race, say, at Florence, then there's not another AMS race anywhere in the country. So to get AMS points that night, you have to be at that racetrack, and you actually have to be running against the guy that you're trying to beat for points, if that makes sense.
No, it does, yeah.
So, but our going back to our rules is our engine rule is not there's not a whole lot of engine rules, which I like that. There's not a whole lot of chassis rules, which I like that. The body rules they're pretty particular on. They do all that stuff a lot. They're always measuring and looking at that stuff. We have to any of our suspension components can't be aluminum. They have to be steel, so they just stick a magnet on them. I think a whole lot of what keeps this class keeps the cars equal is the tire. They don't have a whole lot of traction, so they really don't care how much horsepower you make or whatever, So you can pretty well do whatever you want to with the engine, and you're limited by what you can get to the ground because the tire is a small tire, and they've took our spoiler away. We don't have big spoilers, so there's just not a whole lot of downforce on the car. So the tire and the aero package kind of limits what you can do anyway. So,
well, in a box like that, with they being so stringent on rules, I guess that some of these tracks and different places could benefit. Maybe, and I know they've tried the U.M.P street stocks around here before, and they're still sort of around, some of the Neesmith stuff. But it's not like it was to where, all right, guys, here's the rules. These guys are going to be here, and they're going to enforce them. That's just what it is. And you're right. You got a lot of rules, but if you're not teching the cars, you're not enforcing the rules, some of the stuff happens that we see,
Well, you can't come up with a 50-page rule book and then have 4 tech guys to tech 40 tracks, So, I think it's just kind of one of those deals, and I don't know the right answers to it. I'm just like anybody. I can pick out what's wrong with it, but I can't tell you a solution. So, but you can't come up with rules that you can't enforce. You might as well just leave them out. If a rule's not going to be enforced, just throw it out. So the honest people don't have a guilty conscience, Yeah. If you're going to let it go anyway, then just throw the rule out and let it be.
Yeah. Well, and again, the state of racing here, and you talk about running up in Illinois a lot, Indiana, down in Tennessee a little bit. It's just like I've said, I don't think racing's dead here. I just think we're maybe in a little slump,
Yeah, we went to Springfield, Missouri one night to a race out there. It was a local race. Man, the pits were there was 100 and for the national anthem, they lined all the cars up on the track 3 wide, and it was the whole racetrack was full. There was 120 cars on a regular night. Yeah. So I have a hard time believing it's the economy. It's something that's going on around here, and I don't know what it is, but racing is very, very healthy in other parts of the United States that are not that far from us. And I do feel like it's gotten a little bit stronger around here recently. So I mean, I think it's and I think mod racing. You know, I've talked on the local stuff, but I think modified racing, U.M.P modified racing, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
I think you're exactly right.
You know, we're getting now to where we're getting national TV coverage. We run. You can watch the Volusia race on. I think it was on MAV TV this year. So just about every AMS race that we run in is available on pay-per-view. So I really think that the dirt modified is growing on a national level just about quicker than any sport around. I mean, it's really taken off. 10 years ago, if you heard of a modified race paying $1,000 to win, that was good pay.
Oh, that was huge.
A lot of tracks are paying that as their weekly pay now. A couple years ago, just 2 or 3 years ago, Fairbury announced that they were going to have a race called the KC Modified Nationals that pays $10,000 to win.
Right.
Well, that was huge. Well, this year we have, I think, 3 or 4 races that pay $10,000 to win, and one in West Virginia that pays $15,000 to win. So it's just getting bigger and bigger every single year, and it's growing at a pretty fast rate. I'm very fortunate to be in a position I'm in where I can grow with it. So I really enjoy what we've been doing here the last couple of years, and it's I think modified racing in a whole is in a really good place.
Yeah, and I wish that that we could learn lessons because even you mentioned Tri-State Speedway earlier, and I've done this on just about every show, but the Helfrichs up there have their stuff together.
Yeah, and look how long they've had that track. I mean, it's been under the that racetrack's open every year. And they only have 2 classes on most nights, so they don't really even have like a street stock class or whatever. But they have a lot.
That makes me sad. I would love to race there, but
they have a lot of mod guys that only run there. So like you go over there on a regular modified night on a regular show, and the modified class will have 20 cars because they have 12 to 15 that only run there. Well, those guys can build those cars and know that place is going to be open in 5 or 6 years.
Yep.
So if like when we're racing 50 or 60 races a year like we do, your cars need to be replaced every 2-3 years at the most. But those guys know they can build a car. Tri-State Speedway runs 12 nights a year. Mm-hmm. They can build a car. They can run it 5 or 6 seasons, only have 60, 65 nights on it. So that's not that big of an investment for them to spread over that amount of time. Where, the tracks around here, you're always hearing, well, this track's closing. Well, no, it's not closing because this person has it. Well, this person's talking about getting it. You just never have that security to where, hey, I'm going to build this car and I get to use it for 5 or 6 years. Right. I think that's hurt the racing around here worse than anything.
Well, and that right there is you're right, and maybe not for the mods, and cool that Windy Hollow and of course Cedar Ridge has done this. Never really has not been without the U.M.P modifieds, but Windy Hollow coming back full time with the mods every single time they race this year. So.
Well, I was kind of talking more on why their street stock classes and stuff don't have that.
No, that's what count. Exactly. Yeah, I was going to get into that too.
But I'm not sure that we don't really have any local mod guys anymore. The guys around here that do mod race, most of the guys around here that are mod racing they do travel and they do run the bigger races. So for them to bring that class back, I think it's a great deal for them. But I think there's going to be some growing pains with it. I mean, they're going to have to bring it back, and they're going to have to go through a year or two of. It's going to have to get back to the point of where people are building a car just to run it there. Yeah. That's how you get your local your local stuff back. And I don't really know what's going on with Chandler. With them being on, with Windy Hollow moving to Friday night, and I'm pretty sure Ponderosa Speedway used to run on Friday nights too, so that might help their weekly mod car count. I love racing at Windy Hollow. I will be there every time that we're not off racing. If I'm at home and they're racing, then we'll be out there. But I haven't really looked at the schedule yet to say I can be there every night. And I think there's a lot of people like me that will race there often, but I don't know that there's a lot that will say, yeah, I'm going to be there every night. So I think there's going to be a few nights where the car count's a little off, but if they stay with that and they say, hey, we're running mods every night, and it goes on 2 or 3 years, the end of that second season or the beginning of that third season, you're gonna start seeing guys that have built a car just to run there, So it'll take a little while, but I definitely think it can work.
Well, stability, is the key there, and that's what we run into a lot with the cruiser class, Rusty Boat class, and things like that. Is, again, we try to build a car to run a track, but then the rules sometimes are so different at each of the 3-4 tracks around here. It's almost hard to do it because maybe you can run this intake there, or you can't run it here, or this tire there, or this not. And that's maybe what's limited some of our stuff, I guess, just a little bit. But maybe it's going to get better. Maybe we're just in a slump right now.
Yeah, I really think that. I know people around here have been trying it for a long time, and it hasn't ever really worked great. But man, the around here they call them an E-mod. In Illinois, they have a division called a B-mod,
right,
which is similar to the E-mod, but they got a little bit stricter rules. And I really think that I have a hard time believing that that's not going to be a good local class eventually. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't really know what they're doing in that area up there to get the car count that they have, but man, like they have 30 a night, and there's no reason it can't get to that here. But if they're going to mandate a crate motor, they're going to have to check that crate motor.
Right.
And I'm not even sure what the rules are up there. I don't know if they're crate motors or street stock type motors or whatever. But if I was some of these track owners around here, I'd be up there spending a couple weekends, at least be on the phone seeing what's going on up there, kind of get in line with their rules, because there's not really a lot of E-mods right now anyway. So it'd be real simple to adapt their rule package and bring it down here, because there's not. I mean, what do we have around here locally for E-mods? Maybe 6 that run consistently. So it's a lot easier to come up with a new set of rules when you have 6 cars versus when you have 10 or 12, because you don't want to run all them guys off. But
that's all good points for sure, and just don't worry about talking about the E-mod stuff or the modified stuff, because that does translate into some of the lower classes of just competitiveness of what the base things you need to do to make a class sustainable. And I think that you've hit that on the head. Again, it doesn't matter what class you're talking about, whether that's mini stock all the way up to full blown super late model. There's certain things that you have to do to keep it sustainable, and there's a lot of factors that will go in there, being track ownership, track surface, rule packages, different things. But I think you've made a lot of good points that translate down.
Yeah, I think just like you said, like I said earlier, consistency's the key. It's just people don't want to spend that investment when they don't know that they're going to get to use it for a long time.
Right. Well, one thing I want to ask you about real quick is, when you look at coming off the state of racing and the way we are around here right now, what are some of the stuff you would like to see in the future? Now, you can put your fan hat on now. You don't have to necessarily be a driver, but you can if you want. Some of the stuff you'd like to see, you talked earlier about the non-wing sprints. Is that something you'd want to see come to Windy Hollow Speedway, Cedar Ridge Speedway, stuff like that? Or is there classes that maybe run somewhere else that they need to bring here?
If there was a non-wing sprint race out there, I would definitely go watch, without a doubt. But I don't really know the answer to that question. I'm always so we're always so into what we're doing here at the shop that we don't really. I don't really think enough about that to really give you an answer right off the top of my head. But I just like when I go to Windy Hollow or Cedar Ridge or whatever, I would really like for the classes to not be. I mean, I'm a fan of watching the cruiser stuff and the rusty boat stuff. I watch that stuff. I enjoy watching it. It's I don't know anything about those cars either, so it's just as fun for me to watch them. But they need to do something to separate the classes where, like when you go, a lot of times when we're at Cedar Ridge, we're down there working. Well, if we get everything ready, we'll go up on the hill and watch. And I would really like to see something that separated those classes, and I don't know the answer to what that is, but if there was anything I could change about local racing, that's what it would be, is the classes were less similar.
Well, and and that's the thing is I think that they've in the last, just if you take the last 5-year block, I think they definitely have, and one of the things is a lot of times we get marred down, or tracks do, and again, I'm not a promoter, don't pretend to be a promoter, and I wouldn't know the first thing about running a racetrack, but being a racer myself, it is. I mean, when you get 4 classes, just talk about, or 3 classes, you got your cruisers, you got your rusty boats, and your bombers, okay, and you take certain rules, just a couple of certain rules can keep you out of the rusty boat class and make you run the cruiser class, or vice versa. Yeah. And whether that's cubic inch or, just a carburetor or different stuff. And again, to me, I love full body stock cars myself. It's just what I've always been into. I love the modified stuff too. But it's just, that's my niche. And again, I think you're onto something there with them being too close. But then again, you're right. We had the street stock class, the pure stock class, the cruiser class, and that was it. Then, slowly but surely the street stocks got phased out. The pure stocks became street stocks, and the cruisers went up.
Well, it can probably go back further than that. You can probably go all the way back to the days of being pro street. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen when I was younger, pro street cars, competitive pro street cars that were not as nice as some of the cruiser cars we see now. So it just does that over and over and over.
Yeah. It seems like it's in a cycle that way, and we've talked about that. And I even talked about it and brought it up to a couple of guys at the Windy Hollow Rules meeting, just kind of on the side, not really part of the official meeting, but we talked about how every so often, what the classes progress enough to where they have to create another class at the bottom because we need another beginner class now,
right.
And that's, I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, but I think at some point we need to start like, look, guys, all right, they've done this 15 times, and it's always the same, and again, we're talking to a few different promoters, and they're like, well, if you want to run this class, here you go. If you want to run this class, well, it's the class below that. Here you go. If you want to run a beginner class, there it is. And I get that. And again, on some ways, I do agree. But you're right. When does it end? When does a cycle end? Yeah. And is it working? Is it not working? I don't know.
Well, I think every time that happens, every time you drop that top class, you lose all those guys.
Yeah.
Because they're not gonna, even though they could drop down and in 2 years it's going to be the same car, but we've seen what happens is every time that top class gets dropped, those guys are gone. They never come back.
Right.
So when you add that beginner class, you're getting a lot of guys that have never been in racing before, but how long are they going to stay there? Yeah. You're running out guys that have been there for years and are going to be there every week to gain a couple guys that are probably going to be there 3 or 4 months and then be gone.
Right.
So every time, you just need to think about that. Every time they drop that top class, how many guys are they running off?
Right.
Because, I mean, you go out to Windy Hollow right now and sit in them stands and you see, James Weststein sitting out there and all the Clint Colley and all those guys that when they drop their class, they never come back,
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's just, that's just some of the ones I can think of off my head, but there's probably, 40 or 50 of them that had everything stayed consistent, they'd probably still be out there racing.
Well, and I think, some guys like you want to throw it back to, and guys that are still racing, the old man, Bill Mormon, and how he's kind of stayed, he's been on the level, the whole time, and he kind of run the same car for 3 or 4 different seasons and made that investment like you were talking about to say, okay, this is my track. I'm going to run here. I'm going to build me a car for there. And then, eventually it just starts progressing. It moves a little farther, moves a little farther, moves a little farther to where, while Bill is a great driver,
then what
champion,
then what happens is you have a guy that's because he's moved up with the class, and now he's having to spend more money on his car than what he wants to spend, and so a lot of times instead of dropping back to the division below him, not saying that Bill's going to be this way, but other guys, for example, is like, they move up with the class, then that class gets too expensive for them, then they're gone.
Yeah. And they either forced to sell their car, and you look how much money it would take to drop it back down. Some of the stuff you got to undo to your car. I mean, that's a big deal. And again, racing is a money game. I mean, who we kidding? It's expensive. And I will tell you, I will bet you understand that. But it is a money game, and it's hard to let go of that money when you've put yourself in a position and then have to completely change.
Yeah. It's a tough deal. You just gotta consistency is the key to anything. I feel like so. Like I said, I'm not a promoter. Don't pretend to be. Don't even want to be. But if if there's one thing that I see that I feel like is hurting local racing, that's definitely it.
Well, and we're not calling out any tracks, guys. At no point are we mean any certain track around here. Everything could be better or it could be worse. I mean, it could go either way at any time. And each track's got their different formula that they think is going to work, and that's part of being a promoter. And again, we're not promoters. We don't know the ins and outs of that business. Jimmy gave us a little insight on it, but we don't know that. But we are happy. At the end of the day, we're happy to have a place to race, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Josh, real quick, I'd like to sum up your year last year. You had a stellar year in the U.M.P. modified class, and just looking at some of the stats here, won the track championship at Windy Hollow Speedway, just edging out Chad Boone. 4th place Cedar Ridge Speedway because you were off traveling some. And just got beat by Chad Boone. I thought that was pretty funny when I was looking at it. But 11th, U.M.P. national points. And that's guys with Mike Harrison, Kenny Wallace, Nick Hoffman, all those guys, very, very tough, competitors there. And to be in that class, and it just showed the top 60. So to be in the top, half of that is awesome to me. And then you want to talk about your American Modified Series championship that you won.
Well, we don't really run for national points. Obviously, the best we've run in national points, I think we run 5th one year. So, but anytime you can finish up in the top 10 of that deal, it's pretty cool. But the deal there is the way the national points work is. They work off bonus points.
Right.
So if you're constantly at a racetrack that has more than 20 cars, then each night you get bonus points for that. So it's really tough to be in this area and run for national points. So anytime a guy from around here can break that top 10, it's a pretty big deal for him. We did win the American Modified Series Championship this year, and that's one thing I'm really proud of. That's that was our goal to start the season last year when we started a new team. We decided to come back home. 2 years prior to that, we were the last 2 years in 2015 and 16. I was racing for Scott and Elmo out of Evansville. 2017, we decided to come back home and race out of our own shop. And when I went to, I started going to guys to put our program together and for Mark Bush Race Cars and Philip Oakley and all the other guys that help us. That's what I presented to them. We're going to run for the American Modified Series Championship, and I think this is what we can do. So for me and my wife to be able to, in about 3 years' time, be able to go from we're not sure how we're going to be able to afford to run this series to being able to win it is very it's something we take a lot of pride in.
Oh, absolutely.
It's something that my wife, anybody that knows my wife or sees her at the track knows that she works at this as hard as I do, if not more sometimes. So it's something you got to really be dedicated to, and something we're really proud of. But one of the things that I'm most proud of where we're at in our racing right now is I have always looked up to the guys that could come to a racetrack they've never been to, and they go out on the racetrack, and the first laps they're to speed. I can't tell you how many times I've watched late model guys show up at a place they've never seen, and they go out there and they set fast time, they win the heat, and they win a feature. And that's always been them. I've always been in awe of those people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, how do you do that? And in the last 2 seasons, we've been to 2 racetracks we've never seen, and we've set fast time, and we've won the heat, and we've won the feature. Yep. And one of them was one of the biggest races that we've won. We won the Patriot 100 this season. Mm-hmm. At Lincoln Park Speedway. When we went there that morning, when we pulled in the gate, it was the first time I'd ever seen the track. We qualified second, we won our heat race, and we led 79 laps of 100 and won the feature. So that's the thing that I'm probably the most proud of, is that we're to a point in our career that we can show up anywhere we go, whether we've been to that racetrack or not. Used to, if I'd been to the track 3 or 4 times and I was on my way there, I thought, okay, we've got to feel for the place. Tonight's the night where we can contend on winning. Yeah. So to be able to put that in your mind that, hey, we're going to this racetrack tonight, and this is a big race, and it's going to be the best guys in the country there, and we know that there's a good chance that we're going to be able to compete for a win at a place we've never been to. That's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of. And we did that at Charleston Speedway also last year. Mm-hmm. We went up there and never seen the place, set fast time, won the heat, won the feature. And then also the very first time I went to Brownstown Speedway, we broke the track record. First, and we didn't even get hot laps that night. So my first lap around the track was a track record. So to be able to do that kind of stuff is that's definitely, I definitely have a lot of pride in that.
Well, I think that's something that you should be proud of, and I don't know, even we talk about winning, and winning is very, very important to a driver, but to be able to do stuff like that, and that to me is going to turn heads anywhere you go. It doesn't matter who it is, but that's going to set you apart, and that's going to turn people's heads, and that's going to get you noticed because you're doing that, and they're like, who's this guy? Yeah. Where'd he come from? And then, bam, you just burst onto the scene like that.
The funny thing is about that deal at Brownstown is, man, I went off into the Brownstown, Indiana, and you think that place being so close to home that we would have raced there quite a bit, but we hadn't. It's about, what year was it? 2014, 15 was the first time we went up there. Yeah. when we set that track record. And when I made the lap, when I was pulling back to the pits, I was picking that lap apart. I knew I had messed it up. And I get back to the pits and the crew's all happy and cheering. I'm like, what, we in top 10 or what? And they're like, no, it's a track record. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, I knew I
screwed that lap all to pieces.
Yeah, I knew I screwed turn 3 up, and I just got lucky, Yeah. So.
Well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. Well, it's time now to get to the laundry list of sponsors. I see you got it sitting out there. If we need to, it probably stretches out to the garage, so we may take a minute to get through them. But
I do have a ton of people that help me and have supported me, and a lot of these guys are new, and a lot of them have been with me since day one. And a lot of people that ain't on here that I would like to thank is Kenny Wright. I drove for him for 5 or 6 years, and to be able to run for him and run around here and do the things we did, I'm thankful for what he's done for us. And Jeff Martin, he was one of the first guys I drove for in a dirt car. If those guys hadn't given me a chance to get started, then I'd never be where I am today. And I thank those guys a lot. And then for Scott Clippinger, gave me the opportunity to get out and start traveling and hitting some of the bigger races, and I thank him for that. And then obviously like Mark Bush and Phillip, those guys aren't really sponsors with me. We're more of a team. Me, Mark, and Phillip, we work together real well, and I'm listed as team owner, but it's those guys work so close with me and are so supportive of me that it's more like us three are a team, and I really thank those guys a lot. And Jay and Curtley out at Oakley Motorsports, the hours and that they put in and the knowledge they have is second to none. Obviously, MBR race cars, like I said, is best cars in the country. And Gary and Hilda with T&E Auto Sales, they've been with me for a real long time, and it's kind of funny because I thought when I raced around here, I thought, man, those guys go to every race we go to. I was like, can't believe they go that much. Well, then we got out and we started traveling, and they still go. I think we could be like racing in an Arctic Circle, and I'd look up and there'd be two people in the stands, and it'd be them two. So, anyway, I thank them. I thank Joe Beard with Joe Beard Trucking. He helps me a lot. Ted Brown with Ted Brown's Quality Paint and Body Shop. Bill Floyd at Lucas Oil Center. Some of the new ones we got on this year, APD carburetors. We did some testing with them last year and gave them some feedback, and they completely redesigned a carburetor for us this year. So it worked out real good on the dyno. We haven't been on the racetrack yet. I think once this show airs, we would have already raced a time or two. But as we sit here today, we haven't raced yet. So I'm really excited about what we got going on with those guys. Kevin Bird at RB&S Automotive, he helps me out a lot. Wright Steel, Frigola Fittings, FK Rod End, Right Foot, Safecraft, All-Star, Integra Racing Shocks. This is going to be our first year with them. They're still built by Mark Bush Race Cars, obviously, but we're going to be on mainly we'll be running their stuff exclusively this year, so I'm pretty excited about that. Kaiser Manufacturing, Profiler Heads, World Products, Diamond Pistons, Simpson Racing Products, Keith's Drywall, Tommy Fisher at Fisher's Key Stop. One thing about Tommy is, man, nobody realized how much that guy does for the local racing.
Oh, exactly.
Local racing and local kids. He's such a good person, and I really appreciate what Tommy does for us. ISP Seats, Quick Car, Performance Bodies, Howard's Post Frame Buildings, Tharp's Roofing and Siding, Ron Staples Tank Truck Services, PSC Steering Boxes, Wildwood Brake Systems. That whole list I just gave, they all are a big part of my team, and a lot of the reason for the success we've had, and I appreciate each and every one of them.
Well, that's quite the impressive list, and one that I know you're proud to have. And given and I know each and every one of them is proud to be on this journey with you, and to go into the heights and ascending to the heights that you have just in at least the last 3 to 4 years. I don't think we've seen the best. I really don't. I believe that, and I hope you believe that. I don't think we've seen the best of what Josh Harris has to offer. I think it's just going to keep going up from here. And I know that based on today, I know 10 times more about you than I did, and I'm so happy that I got to sit here and have a great conversation about all the things that we have.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. It's a great deal you all have going on, and anytime we can, all these people that help us, they help us mainly because they like to see their car on the track, but a lot of times that car is going around the racetrack, and the fans in the stands don't know what's actually on there, so anytime we can get that out there and let everybody know who's helping us and what's a part of our success, and it's a great deal that you all have going on, and I appreciate what you're doing, and look forward to talking with you again.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you and your family inviting us into your home. We took a break from the old Whitesville recording station at my kitchen table to trade it out for your kitchen table today, and we can't say how honored we are that you let us into your home and invade your tea jug, if we could say that. But we appreciate it, and Josh, can't thank you enough. Thank your family enough, and we hope to see you at a racetrack very soon and catch up with you.
That sounds good. Thank you all.
All right, guys, we're going to roll into our last break. We're going to be back to close this episode out. Just wanted to take a second here on the podcast to recognize one of our good friends and sponsors. It's going to be Gabriel Kirtley down there at Fairview IT Management. They're based out of Owensboro, Kentucky, and they're here to help you with pretty much any of and all of your computer needs.
Yeah, they offer residential services or business services, whether you want to back your photos up online to make sure you don't lose them, virus management, or if you need some help getting some new technology set up, they can take care of it for you. For your businesses, they offer all sorts of solutions, and all you have to do is give them a call at 270-228-4339.
I think you can probably go ahead and find them online as well.
Yeah, their web address is fairviewitm.com.
And we're back for the final segment. Man, what a show it's been, Wes. Josh Harris, man, he laid it on us today.
I am blown away.
It was pretty cool. Had some great insight, and I knew he would. I told you at the start of the episode he would, and he did not disappoint. He delivered tenfold, I think.
He's wow. I mean, it's crazy to see. Again, like I said at the beginning, I'd heard his name kind of everywhere. And then to get to sit down and talk to him and hear his stories and all that, it was wow. It was really, really freaking cool.
Well, he's had an awesome career so far, and he's not done. I mean, he is
by no means.
No signs of slowing down from that group. And man, I mean, he and his wife, that's their race team. They got a couple of people that go help them, but that's them. And they do it all out of their own garage with assistance. I mean, he went through his laundry list of sponsors, and like I said,
well, you don't get that many sponsors by not having the chops to back it up.
Well, yeah,
so
and that's true, and he does, and we don't want to sound like fanboys, but
sometimes you can't help it.
Yeah, I know it, and he's just that cool of a guy. And I'll tell you one thing that stood out to me. A lot of the ideas that run through my head about racing and local racing and different things, man, it's like he was just pulling them right out of my brain, So I mean, he's along the same lines, and that's pretty cool. So, man, just can't say enough.
Yeah, and I don't want to just sit here and sound like a fanboy because I absolutely could. I mean, I am, Josh Harris all the way, and. Along with our other racers, I wish all of our other racers in the area fantastic, seasons, and I want wins for all of them too. But
well, I think here's the thing: is you're going to come around to them just like you did Josh because you haven't got to talk to them yet. So,
true,
and a lot of them I know, but that's the point of this show is there's what we did 2 hours, with him, and I learned so much. It's just like when, learning so much from Jimmy and Jake and Blaze and even Blake. And,
I mean, the thing about these episodes and this show, at the beginning I was like, man, from a production standpoint, we're going to have to keep these down into small, bite-sized, stories and short, so we can stay under an hour. I don't want to do that anymore.
No, and I really think we would shortchange the fans out there, and not just fans of our podcast, but fans of racing. They need to hear it, and they need to hear the whole story. And I don't think there's a substitute for that. Cutting that down would just be a travesty.
And if you have to listen to the podcast in 4 or 5 sittings, please do.
Yeah.
Because,
don't give up on it after the.
No, we don't.
After listening to us be. We complete idiots for the first 15 minutes.
No, we don't want, like you said, we don't want to shortchange the drivers and their experiences, and so
But here's the thing. Again, we've said this and said it and said it. This show obviously is a part of us. A part of this race team. But this show is for our guests. This show is for the fans. This show is for the racing community. Mm-hmm. And we have stood by that 6 episodes in, 60 episodes in. Please let us get there. You know what I mean? But we're going to say the same thing. There's no reason to change it.
Nope.
People are listening. People want to hear the stories. and it's just working. I really believe that.
Agreed.
So
100%.
This thing is so cool, and not and stepping aside, just the experience itself from what we're doing is fun.
Agreed.
I mean, it's fun to me. I look forward to recording. If we have to go to someone's residence,
their business, side of the road, wherever
we'll
it is.
do it.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's not that hard to take equipment with us.
Nope.
We pack it down to a bag and a box, and it fit right in the trunk. So,
Yep.
So that's pretty cool, man. Before we get too much out of hand, I know we're long on this episode anyway, but I think it's been worth it. It definitely has been worth it for me, and I'm hoping it's been worth it for you.
Oh, it's great. Fantastic.
Well,
and race season is underway.
Oh, it's already underway. Yeah,
we've got races happening, so make sure you're getting out there, get the family out there.
Support your local tracks, guys. I mean, whether that's in Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, get out there and support these tracks. Support these guys that's putting on a show for you. That's the main reason why they do it. It certainly isn't the money. I can tell you that from a driver's standpoint. It's not the money, because we're not getting paid career money here to race, but we are putting on a show for the fans, and that's a big thing for us.
Now, I will say, as far as the racing package goes, we really want you guys to be Team Conway.
Oh yeah,
we want to be your favorite driver. If we're not, that's okay.
Yeah,
just have a favorite.
Yeah,
get out there, support them every week. They're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this.
And you don't have to have, everybody doesn't have to have the same favorite driver. And
no.
They can be in the same class and going head to head. That's okay too. It's just like any other sport. So
but Team Conway is a pretty cool team to be on.
It is. I like it. If you don't yet have a shirt and a hat, sticker, let us know. We can get you one. Hats are $22, shirts $15, stickers are $2 a piece. But I'll tell you this. You can do the deal.
I love a deal.
You can do the deal. You can get the hat, the shirt, and the sticker all for $35. I think it's a heck of a deal. Even if you put it in your bird cage or whatever. I mean, it's going to be okay. So, real quick, you can find our show, iTunes, Google Play, Podcast Addict, Podbean.com, Stitcher, Spotify, now on YouTube. You can find them on our website under the podcast section, www.conwayracingteam.com. You can find us on Facebook. We post them there every week, every Friday. As of right now, for sure, Conway Racing Team on Facebook, Twitter at Conway Race Team, Instagram, Conway Racing. Quick list of our sponsors: Mach 5 Race Cars and Parts, Fairview IT Management, Martin's Towing and Recovery, Chad's Barbershop, Glenstone Construction, Slingshot Media Group, and as always, we're affiliated with Casper Racing, Phantom 309 Racing, and Blaze Milton Racing. So a lot of help from everyone, and we can't do it without people who are supporting us, and we just want to support them. Support those who support you.
Absolutely.
So that's the biggest thing. I think we've rambled enough, man.
I
think this episode is probably going to go into next year sometime, so if we don't quit. So
it's going to have its own zip code.
It probably will, and we better just go ahead and back out of here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed Josh's talk with us, and stay tuned for future episodes. We got a lot of guests on the horizon, big guests coming up as well. I mean, they're all on the same level to us, and everybody's cool, and we appreciate their time, and we appreciate you for listening to us. As for Wes Llewellyn, Wes Iceman Llewellyn, next week you're going to have a different nickname, I promise you. I'm Nathan Conway. We're going to close this episode out, and we'll see you next time.